A billionaire sitting alone in a rusted pickup truck at midnight, staring at a number that could kill his daughter. Not because he was broke, but because every dollar he owned was locked behind lawyers and frozen accounts he couldn't touch before morning. Then the passenger door opened. A stranger in a designer coat slid into the seat, like she'd been expected, looked at the bill in his hands, and said 4 words that changed everything. "I can fix this." She wasn't offering charity. She was offering a deal. And the price wasn't money. Stay with me until the end. And drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight. Not the gentle kind that softens a city at night. The kind that pounds against glass and floods gutters and makes people feel like the sky itself has given up on something. Ryan Bennett sat in his 2009 Ford F-150 in the parking structure across from Mercy Children's Hospital, engine off, heater dead, listening to the rain hammer the roof like it had a personal complaint. He hadn't moved in 40 minutes. The bill was still in his hands. He'd folded it twice, unfolded it twice, and now just held it the way you hold something you don't know what to do with. The number at the bottom, $347,000, hadn't changed no matter how many times he looked at it. Pediatric cardiac surgery, pre-op imaging, surgical team, ICU recovery, anesthesiology. The breakdown was clean, clinical, impersonal, like a grocery receipt for saving a child's life. Emma's life. He pressed the back of his head against the headrest and closed his eyes. Through the cracked window, he'd left it open a half-inch by accident and hadn't bothered to fix it. Cold air moved across the left side of his face. He could smell the rain and the oil from the parking structure floor, and somewhere beneath that, very faintly, the coffee he'd spilled on the passenger seat 4 days ago and still hadn't cleaned up. Emma would have given him grief about that. "Dad, it smells like a gas station in here." She said that about his truck regularly, with the particular brand of 8-year-old disgust that somehow made him smile every single time. He hadn't smiled much in the last 72 hours. Dr. Okafor had been straightforward with him that afternoon, a quality Ryan normally respected in people and currently hated. Emma's aortic valve was deteriorating faster than her cardiologist had projected 6 months ago. The conservative treatment window had closed. Surgery needed to happen within the next 10 days, ideally sooner. The longer they waited, the higher the surgical risk climbed. 10 days. Ryan had spent the last 3 days on the phone. Not begging, he wasn't built for begging, but working the problem the way he'd always worked problems, methodically, rationally, refusing to accept that there wasn't a solution. He'd called his attorney, Marcus Webb, at 7 in the morning the day before and again at 10 at night. Same answer both times. The asset freeze from the pending litigation against his former company, Bennett Technologies, was still fully in effect. His liquid accounts, the ones not entangled in the legal proceedings, totaled just under $180,000. Enough for a lot of things. Not enough for this. He'd tried the bank. The loan officer, a nervous man named Gerald, who'd clearly recognized Ryan's name and seemed uncertain whether to be starstruck or apologetic, had explained that a collateral-backed emergency loan of that size, given the current legal cloud over his assets, would require minimum 10 business days for underwriting. 10 business days. "That's the same as 2 weeks, Ryan had said. "Yes, sir. I'm very sorry, Mr. Bennett." He'd thanked Gerald and hung up, and stood in his kitchen for a long time staring at the refrigerator, which had a drawing Emma had made taped to the door. A rocket ship with 2 stick figures inside, one tall, one small, both wearing helmets. She'd labeled them Dad and Me in her careful, deliberate printing. Underneath, in smaller letters, "To the moon and back." Ryan had looked at that drawing for a long time. Then he'd gotten his keys and driven to the hospital and sat in the parking structure and not moved for 40 minutes. The passenger door opened, not knocked on, not hesitantly tested, opened, with the particular confidence of someone who had decided something before they arrived. Cold air and the smell of rain poured into the cab, and Ryan's hand moved automatically toward the door handle on his side before he registered what was happening. A woman got in and pulled the door shut behind her. She was maybe 30, dark hair pulled back, a long black coat, the kind that costs more than most people's rent, with small drops of rain on the shoulders. Her eyes moved around the interior of the truck with an expression that was hard to read. Not disgust exactly, more like someone doing a rapid, professional assessment. You left your window open, she said. Not hello, not sorry for intruding, just that. Ryan stared at her. Excuse me? The window. She nodded toward the cracked glass on his side. A quarter inch. That's why it's cold in here. He closed the window. The sound of the rain dropped immediately. He looked at her and said with careful deliberateness, Who are you? Vanessa Sinclair. She said it the way people say things they know will land. Not arrogantly, but with the simple acknowledgement that the name carries weight in this city. And it did. Ryan knew the name. Sinclair Capital, fourth largest private equity firm in Illinois. Her father, Douglas Sinclair, had built it over 40 years. She'd taken the CEO chair 3 years ago at 27 and had since been on the cover of Crane's Chicago Business twice and Forbes once. The headline on the Forbes piece had called her the ice architect. He looked at her. She looked at the bill still in his hands. That's a lot of money, she said. It is. For your daughter. He folded the bill slowly and set it on the dashboard. How do you know who I am? Ryan Bennett, founder and former CEO of Bennett Technologies. Sold the company 4 years ago for $1.4 billion, then walked away entirely. Raised your daughter alone after your wife died. Currently asset frozen due to ongoing litigation initiated by the new ownership group. She paused. I did 20 minutes of research in the car on the way here. On the way here from where? A charity gala 2 blocks away. She glanced down at the coat. Yes, I know. I'm aware of how this looks. Ryan studied her. She was uncomfortable. Not in a nervous way, more in the way of someone who had committed to something before fully thinking through the execution and was now pushing forward anyway on pure will. He'd seen that expression before. He'd worn it himself a few times. What do you want? He said. She turned in the seat and faced him directly. I need someone to come to my family's estate in Lake Geneva this weekend. My parents' annual winter gathering. I need that person to play the role of my long-term boyfriend convincingly enough that my father stops trying to engineer my romantic life, which he has been doing aggressively for the last 18 months. She paused. In exchange, I will pay Emma's surgical bill in full by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The rain hit the roof. Ryan didn't say anything for several seconds. You're serious, he said. I don't make offers I'm not serious about. How do you even know about Emma's surgery? Something shifted in her expression, just slightly. I was at the gala tonight with Dr. Patricia Okafor, Emma's cardiologist. We're on a nonprofit board together. She mentioned, not by name, patient confidentiality, that she had a case she was worried about, a child whose surgery was being delayed by financial complications. She looked at the dashboard, at the bill. You were in the parking structure when I walked to my car. I saw you through the window. You had the bill in your hands. A pause. I recognized the hospital letterhead. Psst. Ryan absorbed that. So you ran a background check on a man you saw sitting in a parking garage at midnight, he said. I had my assistant run it. Yes. In 20 minutes. 18, technically. He almost said something, then didn't. He turned and looked out the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking structure. A water stain shaped vaguely like a wolf's head had been there for as long as he'd been coming to this hospital. He'd started noticing it about 4 months ago when Emma's appointments started getting more frequent. What's the weekend look like? He said. Vanessa's posture changed. Not a lot, but enough. Like a hinge that had been under pressure finally getting a degree of relief. Friday evening through Sunday afternoon. The estate is on the north shore of Lake Geneva. There will be approximately 20 guests, mostly family and a few of my father's colleagues. Formal dinner Friday night. Various activities Saturday, Sunday brunch and departure. What's your father like? A beat. Perceptive, skeptical. He has an extremely low tolerance for people he thinks are performing. Ryan looked at her. And you want me to perform? I want you to be convincing. Those are the same thing. They're not, she said. Performing means putting on a character. Being convincing means being yourself inside a context. He thought about that. It was a real distinction, actually. He was mildly annoyed that she'd made it. We'd need a story, he said. How we met. How long. The details. I've already drafted a basic timeline. We met through a mutual connection in the nonprofit sector 8 months ago. We've been quietly together since June. Low profile intentionally because you value privacy for Emma's sake and I value it for professional reasons. That's actually coherent, he said. I know. What about Emma? Does she know about any of this? She doesn't need to know the mechanics. She just needs to know you'll be away for a weekend. Vanessa paused. Though I understand if you're not comfortable leaving her. Ryan turned back to the windshield. Emma was on the 4th floor right now, probably asleep, with the small astronaut nightlight he'd brought from her bedroom plugged into the wall socket beside her bed. She slept badly in hospitals. She'd told him it was because the lights were never fully dark and the hallways were never fully quiet. He'd gotten her the nightlight on the 2nd day, and she'd slept better after that. He thought about Dr. Okafor's face that afternoon. Careful and professional, and beneath both of those things, genuinely worried. 10 days, Mr. Bennett. Ideally sooner. I have one condition, he said. Vanessa watched him. I'll play your partner, he said. I'll be convincing. I'll hold your hand at dinner and remember the story and meet your father. He looked at her directly. But I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. If someone asks me a direct question, I'm going to answer it directly. I'm not going to manufacture a personality to impress your family. Vanessa held his gaze. Whatever she was reading in his face, she took a moment with it. Fine, she said. That doesn't bother you? You being genuinely yourself is probably more useful to me than a performance would be, she said. My father can smell manufactured charm from across a room. He's been doing it for 40 years. Ryan looked at her for another moment. Then he held out his hand. She shook it. Her grip was firm and brief and entirely businesslike, like closing a deal. I'll have the payment authorization sent to Mercy's billing department by 8:50 tomorrow morning, she said. I'll text you logistics for Friday. She reached into her coat pocket and placed a plain white card on the dashboard beside the bill. A phone number, no name. Any questions before then? Use that. She opened the passenger door. Sinclair, he said. She paused, half out of the truck. Why me? He wasn't asking it defensively. He genuinely wanted to know. You could have hired someone, an actor, someone you could fully script. She looked at him over her shoulder. The rain was in her hair now, small drops catching the dim light from the parking structure ceiling. I've spent the last 3 years surrounded by people I can fully script, she said. It hasn't worked out particularly well. She got out. The door closed. He watched her walk through the rain toward a black car idling at the structure exit, moving quickly but without running, like someone who had learned to be efficient in all weather. Ryan sat there for a long time after her car left. Then he picked up the white card and put it in his shirt pocket, next to his heart, which was doing something complicated that he didn't fully examine. He went up to see Emma. 4th floor, pediatric cardiac unit. The nurse at the station, a broad-shouldered woman named Deb, who had been on the night shift every time Ryan had come in after 10 p.m., looked up and gave him the particular nod that meant, she's okay, she's sleeping, you can go in. The room was dim. The astronaut nightlight threw a pale bluish glow across the lower half of the walls. Emma was on her back, one arm thrown over her head the way she'd slept since she was a toddler, her dark hair fanned across the pillow. She had the hospital bracelet on her left wrist with her name and date of birth and room number printed on it in small block letters. Ryan pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. His daughter's breathing was slow and even. Her chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of genuine sleep. He watched it for a while, the way he'd watched it when she was a newborn, in those first terrifying weeks when he kept waking at 2 a.m. just to confirm it was still happening. He was 32 years old and he had built a technology company from a basement apartment in Wicker Park into a billion-dollar operation over 9 years. And he had negotiated with investors who would have sold their own grandmothers for a better term sheet, and none of it, not one moment of any of it, had ever scared him as badly as watching his daughter in a hospital bed. He reached over and very carefully, without waking her, adjusted the blanket that had slipped slightly off her left shoulder. I'm going to figure it out, he said quietly to the dark room. I always figure it out. Emma didn't stir. He sat with her until nearly 2 a.m. At 8:53 the next morning, his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't have saved. Check with billing. He was at the coffee cart in the hospital lobby, one hand wrapped around a paper cup he hadn't drunk from yet. He stared at the text for a second, then walked to the billing window. The woman behind the desk, young, efficient, slightly harried, looked up his file and blinked twice at her screen. "Mr. Bennett," she said carefully, "it looks like your account balance has been paid in full as of this morning." She looked up. "There's a notation here that says the payment was a private charitable contribution." She glanced back at the screen. The entire amount. Ryan stood at the window for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." He walked back to the lobby, stood by the window with his untouched coffee and looked out at the street, where Chicago morning traffic was grinding through the tail end of last night's rain, the gutters still running, the sidewalks dark and slick. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he did have saved. Marcus Webb, his attorney. He answered. "Marcus." "Ryan." Marcus's voice had its usual morning precision, clipped and direct. "I wanted to let you know, I got a call this morning from a legal firm representing Sinclair Capital. They're filing an intervention in your asset freeze case, essentially arguing that the freeze is overly broad and directly harming a minor dependent." Ryan went very still. "When did they file?" he said. "This morning, early. Someone must have started the paperwork last night." A pause. "Do you know anything about this?" Ryan looked down at his coffee cup. "I might," he said. "This is a good development, Ryan. If it works, we could see a partial release within a week." "I understand." "You want to tell me who Sinclair Capital is in all this?" "Not yet," Ryan said. "I'll explain later." He hung up and stood there for a long moment. Then he found her number in his texts and typed, "You didn't just pay the bill." Her reply came back in under a minute. "The legal intervention is separate. It's in Emma's interest, that's all." He stared at the message. 3 dots appeared as she typed something else, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Then, Friday, 6 p.m. "I'll send a car." He put his phone in his pocket. Outside the window, a city bus moved through the intersection, its headlights still on against the gray morning sky. The number on the front reading 36. The same bus line he'd taken every day for 2 years when Bennett Technologies had its first office and he couldn't afford a car payment. He thought about a woman sliding into a stranger's truck in the rain, about a firm handshake and a phone number with no name, about the specific way she'd said, "I've spent the last 3 years surrounded by people I can fully script." He drank his coffee. It had gone cold while he was standing there. The next 3 days moved at the particular crawl of hospital time, structured around medication schedules, doctor visits, and the negotiated normalcy Ryan tried to build for Emma within the 4 walls of her room. He brought her books. He downloaded 3 new astronomy podcasts onto her tablet. He sat beside her bed for hours while she talked, at length and with great technical enthusiasm, about the James Webb Space Telescope's recent imaging of star nurseries. "The pillars in the Carina Nebula," she told him on Wednesday afternoon, holding up her tablet to show him the image. Vast towers of gas and dust backlit in deep orange and blue. "That's where stars are being born, Dad. Right now. While we're sitting here." "Right now," he agreed. "Like new suns." She put the tablet down and looked at the ceiling with an expression of solemn wonder that she'd been wearing since roughly age 5, and that Ryan found difficult to look at directly for too long because it sat exactly at the intersection of everything he loved about her and everything that made his chest ache. "Isn't that insane?" "It's pretty insane," he said. She looked at him. "You're distracted." "I'm not. You have your thinking face." "I have one face." "You have 3 faces," she said, with the authority of someone who had been studying this subject for 8 years. "Regular face, happy face, thinking face." She tilted her head. "Right now it's the thinking face, but you're trying to make it look like the regular face, which is different from just having the regular face." Ryan looked at his daughter. "I'm going away for a weekend," he said. "Friday to Sunday. Deb is going to check in on you more. Aunt Claire is flying in Saturday morning." Emma absorbed this. "Where are you going?" He'd thought about how to answer this. "A work thing, at a lake house. He paused. "It's important." Emma watched him for a moment with the particular gravity she got sometimes. A weight behind her eyes that seemed too old for her face and that had been there, Ryan thought, since the year after Sarah died, The year Emma had quietly learned that the world could take things away from you suddenly and without announcement. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? She asked. I think, he said carefully, it might turn into a good thing. She seemed to accept this. Is it a person or a thing? Ryan stopped. What? The important thing. Is it a person or a thing? She looked at him with perfect 8-year-old calm. Because you get the thinking face for both. But it's different. His daughter was going to be a terrifying adult. Go to sleep, he said. She smiled, a wide, fully satisfied smile, and turned onto her side toward the nightlight. Both, he said very quietly, after he thought she was already asleep. From under the blanket, barely audible, I knew it. Thursday evening, Vanessa's logistics came through. A detailed message with timing, address, a brief list of weekend guests he should know about, and a note at the end. My father's name is Douglas. He will ask you what you think of him within the first 30 minutes. There's no right answer. Just don't try to give him one. Ryan read it twice, then typed back, Who will be hardest in the room? Her reply came quickly. My mother will be easy. My brother Thomas will be suspicious but manageable. My Aunt Patricia will be the one to watch. She has no agenda except observation. She notices everything and lies about nothing. He thought about that. She sounds useful. A pause. Then, she's the only person in my family I fully trust. He almost asked why. Instead he typed, Got it. See you Friday. He set the phone down on Emma's windowsill and looked out at the city. The grid of lights against the black sky. The lake invisible beyond the hospital buildings, but there, always there, its presence felt rather than seen. In the bed behind him, Emma was asleep. Tomorrow was Friday. The car arrived at 6 exactly. A black Escalade with a driver who introduced himself as Carl and offered to take Ryan's bag, which Ryan declined. The bag was a duffel he'd had since college, dark green canvas with a broken zipper on the front pocket, and it looked like what it was. The bag of a man who had once owned very nice luggage and had never gotten around to replacing it after his wife died, and half the things in their shared closet had eventually just disappeared into boxes he hadn't been able to open. He told Emma goodbye at 4:30. She'd hugged him with her good arm, the left one, away from the IV, and told him to bring her back something from the lake. What kind of something? He'd said. A rock, she said immediately. A good one. Smooth. Gray or green, not brown. Brown rocks are boring. I'll do my best. You'll do fine, she'd said, patting his arm with the specific encouraging manner of someone who had clearly decided to be magnanimous about this departure. Aunt Claire gets here tomorrow morning. We're going to watch the whole first season of that space documentary. You've already seen the whole first season. I know, but Aunt Claire hasn't. A pause. I need someone to be properly amazed by it. He'd kissed her forehead and left before it got harder. Now he sat in the back of the Escalade as Chicago gave way to the expressway, watching the city lights thin out and the dark of the exurban corridor take over. Carl drove silently and competently, and Ryan sat with his hands loose in his lap and thought about what he was walking into. A billionaire's family estate. A fake relationship. A man who would ask what Ryan thought of him. An aunt who noticed everything. He thought about Emma asking, is it a person or a thing? He looked out the window at the dark highway. Both, he'd said. What? The estate appeared first as light, warm amber against the black December sky, visible from the private road a full minute before the house itself came into view. Then the house, Georgian in style, long and symmetrical, 3 stories, every window lit. Stone steps leading up from a circular drive where 2 other cars were already parked. The Escalade stopped. Carl came around to open Ryan's door, and Ryan got out and stood for a moment in the cold night air. The lake was behind the house, invisible in the dark but present. He could hear it faintly, or maybe what he heard was the wind coming off it, that specific flat cold that comes off deep water in winter. The front door opened before he reached the steps. Vanessa stood in the doorway. Different than she'd looked in the truck. Her hair was down, she was wearing dark slacks and a simple cream top, and for a split second before she composed her expression, Ryan registered something in her face that looked like relief, which she then immediately covered with professional composure. You're on time, she said. I'm always on time, he said. Come in, come in. He followed her into the entrance hall. High ceilings, dark wood floors, a central staircase, the kind of house that announces its history before it announces anything else. Warm, smelling faintly of wood fire and something cooking. She turned to face him in the hallway and lowered her voice. My father is in the library. My mother is in the kitchen, unnecessarily supervising the caterers. Thomas got here an hour ago and is already on his second drink, which means he's either anxious or competitive, probably both. She paused. My Aunt Patricia is sitting in the chair by the fire in the living room. She knows we just arrived because she notices everything. Do not lie to her, not because she'll definitely catch you, but because if she does, she will simply never mention it, which is somehow worse. Ryan looked at her. You know you're supposed to say hello. How was the drive first? Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile, an acknowledgement. Hello, how was the drive? Long, quiet, good. Good. She looked at him. How's Emma? He registered that she'd asked. He hadn't expected her to ask. Stable, he said. She sent a list of rock specifications. Vanessa blinked. What? She wants a rock from the lake, gray or green, not brown. There it was, brief and unguarded, gone in under a second. A real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes before the person has a chance to manage it. She looked down, pressed her lips together, got it back under control. Right, she said. Okay. She turned toward the hallway. Ready? Ryan picked up his bag. One more thing, she said, not turning around. My father is going to try to unsettle you. It's not personal. He does it to everyone. The important thing is not to perform, he said. She turned then, looked at him. Not to perform, he agreed. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she walked toward the library. Ryan followed. Behind them, the front door clicked shut against the cold, sealing them inside the warm, complicated world of the Sinclair estate. Outside, the lake moved in the dark, and somewhere above it the first stars of the evening were beginning to show through breaks in the clouds, cold and indifferent and very far away. The library smelled like old paper and leather, and the particular kind of money that doesn't need to announce itself. Floor-to-ceiling shelves on 3 walls, a fireplace that had clearly been burning for hours, 2 leather chairs arranged at angles that were just deliberate enough to suggest they'd been placed that way by someone who thought about such things. A bar cart in the corner with bottles that caught the firelight. Douglas Sinclair was standing with his back to the door when they walked in, looking at the shelves like he was considering which book to pull. He was a bigger man than Ryan had expected, broad through the shoulders, with white hair that was still thick, and a posture that had probably looked authoritative when he was 30, and now, at 67, had settled into something closer to permanent. He turned around slowly. The way people turn around when they already know who's behind them and want the other person to understand that the moment belongs to them. His eyes went to Ryan first, not to Vanessa. Ryan noted that. So, Douglas said. That was it. Just so. He set down the glass he'd been holding and crossed the room and extended his hand, and Ryan shook it, and Douglas held the grip a half-second longer than was necessary while he did what Vanessa had warned him about. The rapid, comprehensive assessment that 40 years of evaluating people across negotiating tables had honed into something nearly automatic. Ryan Bennett, Douglas said. Mr. Sinclair. Douglas. He released the handshake. My father was Mr. Sinclair. I've never found the title particularly useful. He looked at his daughter. You look tired. I drove 2 hours, Vanessa said. Carl drove, Douglas said, without missing a beat. He looked back at Ryan. Drink? Bourbon, if you have it. Douglas moved to the bar cart. I have 4. Tell me your preference. Ryan named one. Douglas made a small approving sound, chaffee, not effusive, just noting a data point, and poured 2 glasses and handed one across without offering ice. Ryan didn't ask for any. They stood near the fire, the 3 of them, in the particular arrangement of people who have just met and are deciding whether to sit down or remain standing, which is really a question about who controls the pace of the room. Ryan sat down. Not performance, just preference. He'd been in a car for 90 minutes and a hospital chair for most of the week before that. Douglas watched him do it, then sat across from him. Vanessa remained standing near the bookshelf, which Ryan read as the positioning of someone who didn't fully trust the room yet, even in her own family's house. "What do you do now?" Douglas said. "Not what did you do. Not tell me about yourself. Present tense. Now." "I raised my daughter," Ryan said. Douglas absorbed this. His expression didn't change much, but something behind his eyes recalibrated slightly. "And before that?" "Technology company. Enterprise logistics software. Built it over 9 years, sold it 4 years ago." "Bennett Technologies," Douglas said. "I know the company. Not personally, but I know the name. The new ownership group ran it into a content licensing dispute immediately after acquisition." "They did," Ryan said, "and you're currently frozen in the litigation." Ryan looked at him steadily. "Your daughter mentioned you're perceptive." "My daughter mentions things strategically," Douglas said. A very small pause. "Usually to prepare people for me." He glanced at Vanessa, "which means she cares about the impression you make." Vanessa's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Ryan saw it. "Or she was being practical," Ryan said. "Walking into a room without information is a bad habit." Douglas turned back to him. "You walked away from a billion-dollar company to raise a child alone." "Yes. Most men in your position wouldn't have." "Most men in my position aren't me." It wasn't said with aggression, just as a statement of fact. Douglas looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that is measuring something it doesn't have a name for yet. "What do you think of me?" Douglas said. There it was. Vanessa had said the first 30 minutes, and they were at 12. Ryan took a drink of bourbon, set the glass down on the side table. "I think you're used to being the smartest reader of people in any given room," he said. "And I think that's been true often enough that it's become an assumption rather than a skill you actively exercise anymore." He paused. "I think you love your daughter and don't know how to show her that in a way she can actually use." The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house, a door opened and closed. Douglas Sinclair sat very still. Then he looked at Vanessa. She was looking at Ryan with an expression that had gone entirely unreadable. The particular blankness of someone trying to process several things at once. Douglas said. That was all. Just, He picked up his bourbon and looked at the fire. Ryan didn't fill the silence. He'd learned a long time ago that the instinct to fill silence is usually fear of what the silence means, and he'd mostly kicked that particular fear in his early 30s. After a moment, Douglas said, "Dinner's at 8. Catherine will want to meet you before then. She's in the kitchen making the caterers nervous." The faintest edge of affection in the last sentence. He stood. "Take the room at the top of the east stairs. Vanessa will show you." He walked to the door, paused, and spoke without turning around. "Bennett." The answer was adequate. Then he was gone. Vanessa waited until the sound of his footsteps had receded down the hallway. Then she turned to Ryan. "What was that?" she said, very quietly. "Honest answer to a direct question," Ryan said. "You told me not to perform." "I didn't think you'd aim it directly at him." He asked. She stared at him. He asked what you thought of him. Most people deflect, or compliment him, or say something about his business record. "I know," Ryan said. "That's why I didn't do any of those things." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the door where her father had been. Something in her expression that was complicated to read. Not quite surprised, more like someone who has been expecting one kind of weather and gotten another kind entirely. "He said adequate," she said. "I heard. In 20 years, I have never heard Douglas Sinclair call anyone's answer to that question adequate. He usually just changes the subject." Ryan picked up his bourbon and stood. "Show me the room." She looked at him for another second, then turned toward the hallway. He followed her out of the library, through the wide corridor lined with framed photographs, generations of Sinclairs at various estates, boats, formal occasions, and up the central staircase. The house was warm and solid around them, the kind of warmth that comes from good insulation and old radiators and a fire that's been going all day. At the top of the stairs, Vanessa pointed left. "East wing, third door." She turned to go the other direction. "Vanessa." She stopped. "Your aunt," he said. "Patricia. Tell me one thing about her that's true that you wouldn't normally tell someone." A pause. Vanessa looked at the wall for a moment like she was deciding something. She lost her husband when she was 42, she said finally. Sudden cardiac event. No warning. They'd been married 17 years. She paused. She told me once that she spent the first year after he died being very brave for everyone around her, and then spent the next 2 years being furious that she'd wasted a whole year being brave instead of just being sad. A beat. She said the bravery didn't help anyone, it just delayed her. Ryan looked at her. Okay, he said. She nodded once, then walked down the hall toward the west wing. He stood there for a moment, watching her go, her posture straight, her pace even, and then turned toward the third door. The room was simpler than he'd expected. A queen bed with a good mattress, dark wood furniture, a window that looked out over the back garden, and beyond it, the lake. He set his bag on the luggage rack, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at the window. The lake was partially visible in the dark, a flat black expanse reflecting the scattered lights of the far shore. He thought about Emma asking him to bring back a rock, gray or green. He pulled out his phone, checked his messages. There was one from Aunt Claire, sent 40 minutes ago. We are watching Jupiter documentaries and eating entirely too much hospital pudding. All is well. Emma says hi and also that she expects a full report. He smiled at his phone in the empty room. Then he put it away and went to find the bathroom because he had about 40 minutes before dinner and he'd been wearing the same shirt since this morning. The weekend had started. The night had barely begun. The hardest parts were still ahead. He didn't know yet what shape they would take. Catherine Sinclair was nothing like her husband and nothing like her daughter, and Ryan understood within 40 seconds of meeting her that this was not a coincidence. It was a survival strategy that had become genuine over 40 years of marriage to Douglas. She found Ryan in the upstairs hallway on his way back from the bathroom, and she did not wait for an introduction. She was a small woman in her mid-60s with silver blonde hair and reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the particular energy of someone who has decided that warmth is a more effective tool than formality and has committed to this fully. "You're Ryan," she said, as though confirming something she was very pleased about. She took his hand in both of hers, not a handshake, more of a hold, and looked at him directly with warm brown eyes. "Vanessa talks about you more carefully than she talks about most things." "More carefully," he said. "She chooses every word. With most things she cares about, she chooses every word." Catherine released his hand. "Come downstairs when you're ready. Dinner is at 8. Try the wine before dinner. I had it sent up from a vineyard in the Willamette Valley that Thomas found. And Thomas found it because he's trying to prove something, so it's actually quite good." She turned and walked back toward the stairs, then paused. "How is Emma?" Ryan looked at her. "Vanessa mentioned she's been in the hospital," Catherine said simply. "She didn't give details. She never gives details about things she cares about." "She's stable," Ryan said. "Surgery is scheduled." Catherine nodded. Something in her face settled. Not relief exactly, more like a weight being acknowledged. "Good. She sounds like a remarkable child." Then she was gone down the stairs, and Ryan stood in the hallway for a moment with the distinct sensation of having had two conversations happening simultaneously, the one spoken aloud and the other one underneath it, which he was still parsing. Vanessa had talked about Emma to her mother. That was worth thinking about later. The dinner table sat 14. There were 12 people at it, Douglas and Catherine at the heads, Vanessa and Ryan on one side, Thomas Sinclair and his girlfriend, a tall, composed woman named Bree who worked in art acquisition and had the careful pleasantness of someone who had learned to navigate rich families at close range, across from them. Patricia Sinclair was at the far end near Douglas, a small, sharp-eyed woman in her late 60s with gray hair cut close and the stillness of someone who has long since stopped performing for rooms. 3 other couples rounded out the table, all from Douglas's professional world, all with the particular social fluency of people who had been doing this kind of dinner for decades. Ryan had been at many dinners like this over the course of building and selling Bennett Technologies. He knew the rhythms. He knew where the landmines were. The first half of dinner was fine. Wine was poured. The food was very good. Thomas made several comments angled to probe what Ryan knew about markets and capital structure, which Ryan answered directly and without elaboration, which seemed to frustrate Thomas slightly. He'd been expecting either defensiveness or preening, and got neither. You sold at the right time, Thomas said finally, around the second course. He was about 34, good-looking in a way that suggested he'd been told that regularly, with the restless energy of a man who suspects he's not as smart as his family's name requires him to be. I sold at the only time that made sense, Ryan said. After your wife died, Thomas said. The table didn't go quiet. It was too practiced for that. But Ryan felt the slight collective tightening, the social breath hold of a room waiting to see how a loaded comment lands. After my wife died, Ryan said. He didn't look away from Thomas. Yes. Thomas seemed to realize he'd stepped somewhere he hadn't mapped. He reached for his wine. I'm sorry for your loss, he said, and it came out mechanical because he hadn't meant to arrive at sincerity and now didn't quite know how to wear it. Thank you, Ryan said. Vanessa, beside him, said nothing. But her hand, which had been in her lap, moved under the table and rested briefly against Ryan's wrist. Not a dramatic gesture, just a moment of contact, there and then gone, the way you might touch someone's arm when you're sitting close enough to reach them and the room has gotten difficult. Ryan registered it. He didn't look at her. Across the table, Patricia Sinclair was watching this exchange with her dark, quiet eyes and eating her food and not saying a word. The table moved on to other topics. Douglas was in a discussion about regional infrastructure investment. Catherine was drawing out the woman to her left about her recent trip to Portugal. The room settled back into its rhythms, but Ryan was aware at the edge of his attention of Patricia watching, not intrusively, just the way certain people watch when they are cataloging rather than judging, building a picture that they will carry home in their head and consider privately and never volunteer. He thought about what Vanessa had told him. She notices everything and lies about nothing. After dinner, when the group moved to the large sitting room for drinks, Patricia touched his arm lightly as people were rearranging. Walk with me, she said. Not a question. They slipped out through the glass doors at the end of the sitting room onto a wide covered porch overlooking the garden and the lake. The cold was immediate and clean after the warmth of the house. Patricia pulled her cardigan tighter and looked out at the water. You don't have to say anything particular to me, she said. I'm not testing you. What are you doing? Ryan said. Looking. She glanced at him sideways. Vanessa hasn't brought someone here in 9 years. The last time she was 21, and it lasted 6 weeks and ended badly in a way she never fully explained. A pause. Then Marcus came. She was 24. Ryan waited. He was everything on paper, Patricia said. Smart, successful, family background that made Douglas practically weep with relief. He loved her, I think, as much as he was capable of loving anything that wasn't his own ambition. She looked at the lake. He died in a car accident on the 290 on a Tuesday morning 4 years later. He was 31 years old. The weather was clear. Nobody ever fully explained what happened. The lake moved in the dark below them. Wind off the water. She was engaged to him, Patricia said. They'd been engaged for 7 months. She was 28. Ryan stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the lake and said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say, and Patricia didn't seem to want him to say anything. She built a wall that year, Patricia said. Not dramatically. Vanessa doesn't do things dramatically. She just contracted, went smaller inside herself and wider in every professional direction. Work became the only thing she let take up space. She paused. Douglas called it resilience. I called it something else. We disagreed. What did you call it? Ryan said. Patricia turned and looked at him directly. Her eyes were steady and entirely without softness, but not unkind. The eyes of someone who has dispensed with the comfortable lies and not replaced them with cruelty. Survival, she said. Dressed up as control. The wind came off the lake again, cold and flat. Why are you telling me this? Ryan said. Because you asked me to be honest with you, she said. He hadn't asked her anything. He'd asked Vanessa about her. He hadn't said a word to Patricia yet, except, "What are you doing?" He looked at the old woman. Vanessa told me what you said to her father in the library, Patricia said, and the ghost of something that wasn't quite a smile moved across her face. Word travels fast in small houses. She adjusted her cardigan. You see people reasonably clearly, Mr. Bennett. The question is what you plan to do about what you see. I'm not planning anything, he said. No, she agreed. I don't think you are. That might be the only thing in your favor with her. She turned and went back inside, moving through the glass doors with the unhurried confidence of someone who has said exactly what they came to say. Ryan stood on the porch alone for several minutes. The cold worked its way through his jacket. The lake was invisible below the dark garden, audible only as a faint restlessness, water against rock, the sound of something large and patient and without opinion on anything happening up here on the land. He found Vanessa later, near midnight, standing at the end of the upstairs hallway in front of a large window that looked out the same direction as the porch below. Garden, lake, dark sky. She had a glass of water in her hand and was not drinking it. Her heels were off. He noticed that. She was 2 inches shorter without them. "Your aunt is something," he said. "She cornered you on the porch," Vanessa said. It wasn't a question. For about 5 minutes. What did she say? He considered. She told me about Marcus. Vanessa went very still. Not the controlled stillness she used in meetings and at dinner tables. Something different, the stillness of a person who has been unexpectedly hit somewhere they weren't guarding. She didn't have to do that, Vanessa said. Her voice was level, but the level was working hard. No, Ryan said. She did it because she wanted to. She has opinions about my life. She has love for your life, he said. The opinions are a side effect. Vanessa looked at the window, at the dark glass which gave back a faint reflection of the hallway behind them rather than the lake it was facing. She told you I built a wall, Vanessa said. Her word was contracted. A pause. She's not wrong. She turned the water glass in her hands. You want to ask me about him? No, Ryan said. She looked at him. I want to ask you what he was like, Ryan said, which is different. The distinction landed on her face in a way he could see, not dramatically, but real. The difference between someone asking about your grief and someone asking about the person. She was quiet for a long time. Wind pressed against the window glass. Somewhere on the floor below, he could hear Douglas and Patricia still talking in the library, their voices a low, indistinct murmur through the old house's floors. He was funny, Vanessa said finally. That was the thing people didn't expect. He had this completely dry sense of humor that he mostly kept at home. Publicly, he was all performance, ambition. She paused. But in the kitchen on Saturday mornings, he was funny. A beat. He made terrible coffee and knew it, and did it anyway, and found this extremely amusing. Ryan looked at her profile against the dark window. He would have been a terrible business partner for me, she said quietly. We both knew that. We kept our professional lives completely separate because we'd have destroyed each other in a boardroom. She turned the glass again. But he would have been a good husband, I think. I didn't get far enough to be sure. She stopped talking. The house settled around them, old wood and warm air and the soft sounds of a household going quiet for the night. What was your wife like? Vanessa said. He hadn't expected the return question. He'd offered her something and she'd offered it back, and somehow it surprised him anyway. Stubborn, he said. Funnier than me. She had this thing where she refused to let serious moments be too serious. Like if I was stressed about work or money or whatever was falling apart that particular month, she would just not let the room stay heavy. Not dismissive. She wasn't dismissing it. She just... He paused. She had this way of finding the thing in a bad situation that was also a little absurd, and pointing at it until the situation was still bad, but slightly less airless. He looked at the wall. Emma has the same thing, he said. In her own version, she'll be in a hospital bed with a cardiac condition, and she'll be explaining stellar nurseries to you like you've been missing out. Vanessa made a small sound, almost a laugh, the kind you don't mean to make. She sounds like she'd be exhausting in the best way, Vanessa said. Every single day, Ryan said, and he meant it as a complaint, and it came out as something else entirely, and they both heard it. The hallway was quiet for a moment. I should get some sleep, Vanessa said. Saturday's going to be... She stopped. Then, it'll be a full day. Okay, he said. She pushed off the wall and walked toward the west wing, barefoot on the dark wood floor, water glass still in her hand. Vanessa, he said. She stopped but didn't turn around. You were right, he said. Being convincing is different from performing. I think you already knew that when you got into my truck. She stood in the hallway with her back to him. Go to sleep, Bennett, she said. He went to his room. The lake was still outside his window, dark and flat and patient. He lay on the bed without taking his shoes off for a while, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah and about Marcus and about Emma asleep in her hospital room with the astronaut nightlight. He thought about the particular weight of certain kinds of loneliness, not the loud kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that moves in and starts rearranging the furniture while you're busy being functional. He thought about a woman standing barefoot in a hallway talking about terrible coffee like it was a thing she was still grieving, which it was, which it probably always would be in some small degree. He didn't examine what else he was thinking about. He took his shoes off, turned off the lamp, and went to sleep. Outside, the lake moved on without him. Saturday arrived clear and brutal cold, the kind of December morning where the sky is sharp blue and beautiful, and the temperature is sitting at 12 degrees and the ground is frozen solid. Ryan was up at 6, old habit, and was standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee when Catherine found him. She made herself tea and sat across from him at the kitchen island without making any comment about the hour or the silence, which he appreciated. Emma called last night, she said. He looked up. What? Vanessa gave her the house number. Catherine wrapped both hands around her mug. She called at 9:30 and spoke to me for about 15 minutes about the formation of brown dwarf stars. She looked at him with an expression that was entirely warm and only slightly bewildered. She's extraordinarily focused for 8 years old. Ryan sat with this for a moment. Vanessa had given Emma the house number, not her cell phone, the house number. The Sinclair Estate landline. He didn't know what to do with that information, so he set it aside. She's been interested in brown dwarfs for about 3 weeks, he said. Before that, it was magnators. Before that, the Voyager probes. She moves through subjects quickly. She moves through the things she's less interested in quickly, he said. The space stuff is constant, has been since she was 4. Catherine looked at him for a moment. Her mother, she said. Not a question. Sarah had a telescope, Ryan said. She'd set it up on the roof of our first apartment. Emma was barely 3 when she first looked through it. Catherine nodded, said nothing, did not insert herself into the moment, which he appreciated more than he could have explained. They drank their coffee and tea in the winter morning kitchen while the rest of the house slept, and Ryan thought that Catherine Sinclair had, over 40 years, probably become very good at sitting quietly beside people who needed it without making it feel like a project. By 9, the house had woken up. By 10, Douglas had organized a walk along the lakefront for whoever wanted it, which turned out to be himself, Thomas, Ryan, and one of Douglas's colleagues, a quiet man named Hammond who seemed to have been invited every year for 20 years and was comfortable enough to say almost nothing. Bree and Catherine stayed at the house. Vanessa put on a coat and joined them at the last minute, falling into step beside Ryan as they moved down the stone path toward the shoreline. The lake was extraordinary in the December cold. Still in the windless morning, reflecting the blue sky with an almost painful clarity, the far shore visible through the bare trees. Ryan walked with his hands in his pockets and felt, for the first time in several weeks, the specific relief of being outside in cold, clean air, with no hospital sounds anywhere. Your father organized a morning walk, he said quietly to Vanessa beside him. He does it every year, she said. It's a test. What kind of test? The kind where you find out what someone's like when there's nothing to do except walk and talk. She glanced at him. No table, no social buffer, just people moving through cold air. And what do people usually reveal? Thomas complains about the cold by the second kilometer. Douglas slows down on the north section where the path turns and you can see the whole lake at once. He never mentions it. He just slows down. She paused. He's been doing it for as long as I can remember. Ryan looked at Douglas, 20 feet ahead, talking with Hammond, big and certain in his winter coat, his white hair bright against the blue sky. He loves this place, Ryan said. More than he loves most things, Vanessa said. More easily than most things. A beat. It's easier to love a place than a person. Places don't require anything back. Ryan looked at the lake. A piece of pale ice had formed along the near shore, thin and translucent, and the water moved gently beneath it. They walked without talking for a few minutes. Thomas had fallen back slightly and was on his phone, which seemed to confirm something for Vanessa because she glanced back at him with the particular expression of an older sibling who expected this and is not surprised. "He's not bad," Ryan said. "Thomas?" "He's performing," Ryan said. "But he's performing because he thinks that's what this family requires, not because it's what he actually is." Vanessa walked for a moment. "He's been trying to prove himself to my father for 30 years. My father makes it difficult." She paused. "My father makes everything difficult as a matter of principle." "It's how he learns what people are made of," Ryan said. "I know that," she said, a slight edge in it. "Living inside it and knowing why it works are different things." He looked at her. She was watching the lake, her breath making small clouds in the cold air, her coat dark against the pale winter landscape. "You're angry at him," Ryan said. "I'm not." "You are a little bit," he said, not unkindly. "It's the particular kind of not anger that takes a lot of work to maintain." She didn't answer immediately. The path curved and Douglas slowed down, exactly as she'd said, at the turn where the full lake came into view, 5 or 6 degrees off his previous pace, barely noticeable. The involuntary deceleration of a man who still stops, even after decades, to let something beautiful take up its proper space. Ryan watched this, filed it away without entirely knowing why. "He wanted me to be tougher than the world," Vanessa said, finally. "He decided that was love. Making me tougher." She walked. "I think he was right about the tough part. I think he maybe didn't consider what it costs." Ryan said nothing. She glanced at him. "You're not going to argue with me?" "No." "Or tell me he meant well?" "He did mean well," Ryan said. "Both things can be true." She looked at the water. After a moment, something in her posture shifted. Not by much, but Ryan had been watching people for a long time, and he noticed it. Something that had been braced came down a fraction. They walked the rest of the lakefront path, and by the time they came back around to the estate steps, Thomas had complained twice about the cold, and Douglas had said almost nothing of substance, and Hammond had mentioned birds. He was apparently a serious bird watcher, and Ryan had located a small, smooth rock on the path near the water, gray with a faint green tint, and put it in his coat pocket without saying anything about it. Vanessa saw him do it. She didn't say anything either. But as they climbed the stone steps back toward the house, he caught her profile in the winter light, caught the thing she didn't know was on her face, the unguarded, unmanaged thing that was just there for a second before the house swallowed them all back inside. It looked, he thought, like someone beginning to remember what warmth felt like. He didn't examine that thought either. He just carried it, the way he carried the rock in his pocket, careful and quiet, all the way back inside. The Saturday afternoon light came through the sitting room windows in long, pale slabs, the kind of winter light that is beautiful precisely because it asks nothing of you. No warmth, no urgency, just illumination. Ryan was on the phone with Aunt Claire when Vanessa found him, sitting in the window seat at the far end of the east sitting room with his long legs stretched out and his back against the wall, looking like a man who had unconsciously found the one spot in the house that felt least like a formal room. He held up a finger when she appeared in the doorway. She stopped. He wasn't telling her to wait. It was the instinctive gesture of someone mid-conversation who wants the other person to know they've been seen. "How much chocolate pudding?" he was saying. A pause. He closed his eyes briefly. "Claire, that's 4 cups of pudding." Another pause. "She told you it was a medical requirement. It wasn't a question." His tone had the particular resignation of a man who has been outmaneuvered by an 8-year-old so many times that he's moved past frustration into something approaching professional respect. "It's not a medical requirement. She read that sugar accelerates recovery somewhere, and she's been using it as leverage ever since." He listened. "Yes, I know she can cite the article. She can cite anything. That's how she gets away with it." Vanessa stayed in the doorway. She was still in the clothes she'd worn for the walk, dark jeans, a heavy cream sweater, and she had her arms crossed loosely, not defensively, just the posture of someone standing still in a cold room. She was watching Ryan with an expression she wasn't aware of wearing, the kind that only surfaces when someone thinks they're unobserved. "Tell her I'll call in an hour," Ryan said, "and cut her off at 3 cups. He listened. "Claire, 3 cups. We're not negotiating." A pause, and then something in his face softened almost imperceptibly. Yeah, tell her I'll bring her the rock. He said goodbye and hung up. He looked at Vanessa. 4 cups of pudding, he said. I heard. She told my sister-in-law it was a medical requirement. Is it? She found a blog post, Ryan said, written by a nutritionist in Portland who specializes in recovery diets, and she has used it as a citation in at least 3 separate negotiations since her admission. He put his phone in his pocket. She's 8. I don't know whether to be alarmed or impressed. Both, Vanessa said. Obviously. He looked at her. You say that like you know her. I've spoken to her once. Vanessa moved into the room, stopping near the window across from him. She explained brown dwarf star formation to me for 11 minutes on the phone last night. I have a reasonable working knowledge of her at this point. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the lake was flat and silver in the afternoon light, the frozen edge along the shore catching it in small, bright fragments. She called you, he said. She called the house number, yes. Which you gave her. Yes. Vanessa's voice was even, not defensive, just stating it as a fact that existed and was going to continue existing. Why? He said. She looked out the window for a moment. She asked me, when we spoke Friday night, if she could call the house if she had questions about the telescope model. A beat. The James Webb model. I'd mentioned there was one in my old room here. She wanted to know about the solar panel configuration on the real telescope. Apparently they're very particular about scale accuracy on the model. Ryan stared at her. She's in a hospital room. I know. And she asked you about solar panel accuracy on a scale model. In considerable detail. Vanessa paused. She's very exacting. He looked at his phone, then at her, then out the window. She wants to video call, Vanessa said. She asked me to ask you. She was fairly certain you'd say yes, but she wanted to give you the option of saying no if you thought it was inappropriate. A pause. She actually used the word inappropriate, which I found alarming, Ryan said. Charming, Vanessa said, and a little alarming. He looked at her. She had the expression again. The one from the walk this morning, the unguarded one. The one that sat just below the surface of her professional composure and showed when she wasn't working hard enough to keep it down. Okay, he said. Now? Now's fine. She'll be awake. After lunch, she watches whatever documentary she's on currently, and then she's bored until dinner. Vanessa pulled out her phone. He watched her, the quick, practiced movement of someone entirely at home with technology. And within 30 seconds, she had Emma on video. She held the phone so Ryan was in frame beside her, the two of them sitting close in the window seat. Emma's face appeared on the screen. She looked, Ryan thought, slightly better than yesterday. Still pale, still with the IV visible at the edge of frame, but her eyes were sharp, and she was sitting up, and she was already talking before anyone had said hello. Is that the lake? She said, craning to see the window behind them. Can you see the ice? How thick is it? Dad, is it walk on it thick or crack and fall in thick? Crack and fall in thick, Ryan said. Because of the inlet current on the north side, Emma said, nodding like she'd suspected as much. Vanessa turned to look at the lake, then back at the phone. How do you know about the north inlet? I looked up the lake last night, Emma said, as though this were obvious. It's a glacially formed lake. The north end is shallower because the glacier retreated from the south first, so the sediment layering is different, which affects the freezing pattern. She paused. I had a lot of time after the documentary. There was a beat of silence. The model is in the sitting room off the main staircase, Vanessa said. I can show you. Emma's eyes went wide. Not dramatically. She was too composed for dramatic, but genuinely, the way a child's face goes when they encounter something they actually deeply care about. The 1 to 20,000 scale one, the one with the deployable mirror segments, that's the one. Can you show me the sun shield? Vanessa stood and carried the phone across the sitting room, through the short hallway, and into the smaller sitting room off the main staircase, where a large display case held a detailed model of the James Webb Space Telescope. Nearly 3 feet long, every component rendered with the particular obsessive accuracy of the kind of collector who researches before acquiring. She held the phone up. Emma was silent for approximately 4 seconds, which Ryan, watching from the doorway, recognized as Emma experiencing awe and attempting to contain it. The sunshield layers are correct, Emma said finally. All 5. And they got the gold mirrors right, 21.3 feet across in the real one. She looked up from the model at Vanessa through the camera. Did you know the mirrors are made of beryllium? It has to be beryllium because it stays rigid in extreme cold. Most metals contract unpredictably. I didn't know that, Vanessa said. Most people don't, Emma said, not unkindly. She was simply reporting a gap in the general population's knowledge. It took 11 years to build the real one. They folded it up like origami to fit inside the rocket. Then it had to unfold perfectly in space, or it would have been... She paused, choosing her word carefully. Catastrophic. That's a big word, Vanessa said. It's the right word, Emma said. Some situations require big words. Ryan in the doorway pressed his hand briefly over his mouth. He was smiling, and he didn't particularly want anyone to see how much. Emma, Vanessa said, and something in her voice shifted slightly. A register change, quieter, more direct. How are you feeling today? The question landed differently than technical questions. Emma registered it. Ryan saw it on her face through the screen, the small recalibration of a child who has gotten good at answering this question in ways that don't worry adults too much. Better than yesterday, Emma said. That's not the same as good, Vanessa said. Emma looked at the camera for a moment. Then, in a slightly different voice, less the scientist, more just the 8-year-old. My chest hurts in the morning, less than before. It's getting better. Vanessa said nothing immediately. She just held the phone and looked at Emma's face on the screen. The surgery is going to fix that, Ryan said from the doorway. I know, Emma said. She looked at him. I'm not scared of the surgery. A pause. I'm a little scared of the anesthesia. Not because it hurts, because I won't be there for a while and I don't know what that feels like. The room was quiet. Like dreamless sleep, Vanessa said. From what I understand, you simply won't be anywhere, and then you will be again, and it won't feel like any time has passed. Emma considered this with the same face she'd used on the glacial lake formation. Serious, analytical, looking for the error in the logic before accepting it. Has it happened to you? She said. Appendix. I was 26. And it was like that? Exactly like that. One moment and then another moment with nothing in between. Not even dark. Emma looked at the ceiling for a second, then back at the phone. Okay, she said. That's fine then. And somehow she meant it. Not brave-facing it, not performing calm for the adults, but actually practically moving the information from the worry column into the resolved column and continuing on. Ryan had seen her do this her whole life, and it still got him every time. Dad? Emma said. Yeah. Are you okay? It was the same question he'd asked her 100 times this month, reversed and returned with the particular accuracy of a child who has been paying close attention to the person paying attention to her. I'm okay, he said. You have the thinking face. I don't have the thinking face. You absolutely have the thinking face, Vanessa said. Ryan looked at her. She was not looking at him. She was looking at Emma on the screen, and she was smiling. Not the controlled professional almost smile, not the managed version, but a real one, lopsided and unguarded, like something that had gotten out before she noticed. Emma saw it too. She went very quiet for a second, looking at Vanessa's face on her end of the call, and Ryan watched something move behind his daughter's eyes. A thought, a calculation, a conclusion she was keeping to herself for the moment. The model has a deployable secondary mirror, Emma said, returning to the telescope. Can you show me? Vanessa showed her. They talked for another 20 minutes about mirrors and beryllium and the precise temperature of deep space, negative 233 degrees Celsius, Emma specified. And Ryan sat on the arm of a chair in the doorway and watched his daughter talk to a woman she'd met 2 days ago on a phone screen with the ease of someone picking up a conversation that had been going on for much longer than it actually had. Before they hung up, Emma said, Vanessa. Yeah, a pause. Emma was looking at the camera in the careful way she had when she was about to say something she'd thought about. Are you my dad's girlfriend? She said. Ryan went completely still. Vanessa's face did a complicated thing. Several things, rapidly, which she then got under control in approximately 2 seconds. It's okay if you are, Emma said. Or if you're not yet. She was entirely matter-of-fact about it. I just wanted to know. Dad doesn't usually introduce me to people, so you must be different. The room was very quiet. Vanessa looked at the screen and then, just briefly, at Ryan in the doorway. He had no idea what his own face was doing, and for once, he didn't try to manage it. We're still figuring that out, Vanessa said to Emma. Emma nodded, like this was a completely reasonable answer. Okay, she said. The model is really beautiful. Thank you for showing me. And then to Ryan, bring me the rock, gray or green, not brown. Not brown, he confirmed. Bye, Dad. Bye, Bug. The call ended. Vanessa stood holding her phone, looking at the blank screen for a moment. I'm sorry, Ryan said. She does that. She just asks things. She doesn't have a lot of patience for the long way around. Don't apologize for her, Vanessa said. Her voice was slightly rough at the edges. She put her phone in her pocket and looked at the telescope model in its case. She's right. You don't usually introduce her to people. No. So why did you... She stopped. You didn't introduce us. She called the house. She called because you gave her the number, Ryan said. Vanessa turned away from the case. She walked to the window. A different window from the sitting room, this one facing the side garden, snow-dusted boxwood hedges and bare trees. She put one hand against the glass and looked out. We're still figuring that out, she said quietly, repeating her own words back to herself. Ryan said nothing. He'd learned when to speak and when to be quiet, and this was a moment for quiet. I meant it as a deflection, she said. When I said it, I meant it as a way to get out of a direct answer to a direct question from an 8-year-old. She paused. But I said it, and it was true, which wasn't what I intended. I know, Ryan said. She turned from the window and looked at him. She looked tired, not exhausted, but tired in the specific way of someone who has been maintaining a great deal of internal architecture for a very long time and is beginning to feel the structural load. This weekend was supposed to be simple, she said. You got into a stranger's truck at midnight with a deal, Ryan said. It was never going to be simple. It was supposed to be straightforward. Those are different things. She looked at him. He looked back. From somewhere in the main house, Catherine's voice called out something about tea and the particular spell of the small side sitting room, the telescope model, the gray winter light, the still hanging words of an 8-year-old, broke gently, like ice along a shoreline, and they both moved back toward the rest of the afternoon. But the question was still in the room. It followed them out. It didn't go anywhere. Dinner on Saturday was smaller. The professional colleagues had left in the afternoon, leaving just family, and the table felt different with 6 people than it had with 12. More exposed somehow. Less social scaffolding to hide behind. Douglas had opened a different wine, something older, and he was in a quieter mood than the night before. Still present, still watchful, but the edge of evaluation had softened into something more like consideration. He asked Ryan about the early years of Bennett Technologies. Not the sale, not the legal trouble, not the $1 billion. The early years. The basement office, the first employees, the first product version that actually worked. Ryan talked about it. He didn't dress it up. He talked about the 18-month period when he'd paid everyone else's salary before his own and eaten a lot of very bad instant noodles and driven a car with a check engine light that had been on for so long he'd stopped seeing it. He talked about the first enterprise client they'd signed, a mid-sized shipping company in Indianapolis, and how he and his first engineer had celebrated by buying a $6 bottle of wine from a drugstore and drinking it from paper cups in the office at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Thomas laughed at that. A real laugh. Unguarded. The laugh of someone who had heard too many polished success stories and wasn't expecting the paper cups. Paper cups? Thomas said. That's terrible. It was a terrible wine, Ryan said. We didn't care. What was the name of the engineer? Douglas asked. Danny Ortiz, Ryan said. He's still with the company, under the new ownership. He emails me sometimes. Does he know about the litigation? He testified in it, Ryan said. For my side. Douglas absorbed this, turned his wine glass once. Loyalty, he said. He's a good person, Ryan said. Not complicated. Douglas looked at him. You think loyalty is simple. I think Danny is simple, Ryan said, in the way that good things sometimes are. Douglas was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at his daughter. "He's not who I expected," Douglas said to Vanessa, as though Ryan weren't there. "I know," Vanessa said. "That's not a criticism." "I know that too." Douglas looked back at Ryan. "The legal freeze. My understanding is that Sinclair Capital filed an intervention on your behalf this week." Ryan held his gaze. "That's my understanding too." A beat. "That was Vanessa's decision," Douglas said. "Not mine, not the firm's." "I know." "You didn't ask her to." "No?" Douglas turned to his daughter. "You moved fast." "The situation required it," Vanessa said. "You could have consulted me." "I didn't need your approval," Vanessa said. Her voice was even and completely firm. "I made a business and personal decision that I had full authority to make. I'm informing you, not asking permission retroactively." The table was quiet. Catherine was looking at her wine. Thomas was looking at Ryan with the particular expression of someone reassessing a situation they thought they'd already filed. Douglas looked at his daughter for a long moment. "Correct," he said finally. "You don't need my approval." Something eased slightly around the table. Not dramatically. The Sinclair family did not do dramatic easings, but perceptibly. Ryan reached for the bread and tore off a piece and said nothing, because the moment belonged to Vanessa, and she had handled it cleanly, and it didn't need anything added. Patricia, at her end of the table, met Ryan's eyes briefly. She looked at him with the quiet, satisfied expression of someone who has correctly predicted something and has no need to announce it. He gave her the smallest nod. She returned to her wine. After dinner, while Catherine and Thomas were in the kitchen, and Douglas had disappeared to his study for whatever Douglas disappeared to his study for, Ryan found himself in the main sitting room with Patricia for the second time in 2 days. This time, she spoke first. "She paid the bill before she asked you to come," Patricia said. She was looking at the fire. Ryan sat down in the chair across from her. "She said she'd pay it by 9 a.m. It cleared before 9. She paid it the night she met you," Patricia said. "I checked with the hospital accounting department this morning." Ryan was still. "You checked with the hospital accounting department," he said. "I have a contact there. Old board relationship." She turned her glass slowly. "She authorized the payment before she drove to the parking structure, before she even found you." She paused. "She'd already decided to pay it. She was looking for a way to make the offer that gave you something you could accept, that preserved your dignity. The deal was constructed around what you needed, not around what she needed." Ryan sat with that. Outside, the lake was invisible in the night. The fire moved in the fireplace. "She needed the weekend," he said. "She needed something to give you," Patricia said. "The weekend was what she had." She looked at him directly. "My niece has spent 4 years learning not to want things. She's been very successful at it, by most measures." A pause. "You should know that the fact that she sat in that truck is one of the most out-of-character things she has done in years." Ryan said nothing. "She researched you afterward," Patricia said. "Not before. She found you first, then found out who you were." She set her glass down. "She made the decision before she had information. That's not how Vanessa operates." "What are you telling me?" Ryan said. "I'm telling you what I observed," Patricia said. "What you do with it is your business." She stood, the way she always seemed to stand, without announcement, as if sitting and standing were equally natural, and she transitioned between them without needing to signal the change. "Patricia," he said. She paused. "Why did you check with the hospital?" She looked down at him. The firelight moved on her face, and she looked for just a moment like an older version of the woman down the hall. The same sharpness, the same stillness, the same quality of absolute refusal to pretend. "Because I love her," Patricia said. "And I wanted to know if you were someone worth telling." She left. Ryan sat in the chair and stared at the fire for a long time. "She paid it before she found me." The thought moved through him slowly, the way cold water moves through a closed space, finding every gap. She'd been at that gala. She'd heard Okafor mention a child with a delayed surgery. She'd made a decision in whatever time passed between that conversation and when she walked to her car. She'd gotten in the Escalade and had her assistant run the search, and found Ryan in the parking structure and slid into his truck. Not to offer a deal, but to figure out how to give him something he could actually take. He thought about the deal as she'd presented it. Clean, transactional, bounded. A weekend for a bill. Easy to accept. Easy for him specifically, a man who had built his life on fair exchange, on clearly negotiated terms, on not owing things he couldn't account for. She'd constructed it around him. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes for a second. Then he got up and walked upstairs, because the alternative was sitting in that chair all night figuring out what to do with something that didn't have a clean resolution, and he was too tired for that. The hallway upstairs was dark except for the dim light at the far end near the west wing. He was almost to his door when he heard it, faint, through Vanessa's door, which was not fully closed. He stopped, not crying. Something quieter. The sound of someone sitting in the dark, being honest with themselves, which has no good description but is entirely recognizable when you hear it through a door at midnight. He stood in the hallway. He did not knock. He stood there for a moment, hand not raised, not touching the door, and then let it drop. He went to his room. He sat on the bed in the dark and listened to the lake and thought about a woman who had paid a stranger's bill in secret and then constructed a reason for him to be able to accept it. He thought about Emma asking, "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" with the particular serenity of someone who already knows the answer and is giving the adults time to catch up. He thought about Sarah, briefly, the way he always thought about her at moments like this, not with the sharp grief of the early years, but with something more like a long, low ache that had become part of his baseline, the way an old injury makes itself known in certain weather. She had this way of finding the thing in a bad situation that was also a little absurd, he'd told Vanessa in the hallway. Sarah would have found this absurd, a parking garage at midnight, a billionaire in a designer coat, the whole improbable architecture of it. She would have pointed at it and laughed until the situation was still complicated but slightly less airless. He was almost smiling when his phone lit up on the nightstand, a text from an unsaved number he recognized anyway. "Thank you for today. Emma is extraordinary." He looked at it for a long time. Then he typed, "She thinks so too." 3 dots. Then, "I know. She told me during the part about beryllium." He looked at his phone in the dark, sitting on the edge of a bed in a billionaire's estate on the shore of a frozen lake. And he laughed. A real one. Quiet and private and surprising. The kind that comes up from somewhere you'd forgotten about. He typed back, "Get some sleep, Sinclair." A minute passed. Then, "Working on it." He put the phone down and lay back on the bed and looked at the ceiling. Outside, the lake moved in the December dark, patient and enormous, and entirely indifferent to the small, warm facts accumulating inside the house on its shore. He didn't know what came next. That was fine. For the first time in a long time, not knowing what came next felt less like danger and more like possibility. He closed his eyes. He slept, and he did not dream, and in the morning there was still one more day left. Sunday came in gray. Not the dramatic gray of storms, not the electric gray that precedes something. Just the flat, quiet gray of a December morning that has decided to be nothing in particular, the sky the same color as the frozen lake edge, the trees standing bare and patient in it. Ryan was up before 6 again. He'd slept well, which surprised him, and woke with the particular clarity of someone who has processed something significant overnight without knowing they were doing it. He dressed in the dark and went downstairs and made coffee and stood at the kitchen window watching the garden come slowly visible as the light increased. The boxwood hedges, the stone path down toward the lake, the dock, a dark line extending into the silver water. He thought about what Patricia had told him. "She paid it before she found you." He'd carried that thought through sleep, and it had come out the other side changed slightly. Not in content, but in weight. Less destabilizing somehow. More like something he was beginning to know how to hold. He heard her before he saw her. Footsteps on the stairs. Not Catherine's deliberate morning tread, not Douglas's heavier step. Lighter than both, quicker, then deliberately slowed at the bottom, as though the person descending had reminded themselves not to rush. Vanessa came into the kitchen. She was in dark sweatpants and an oversized gray pullover that was too large for her by several sizes. The sleeves past her wrists, the hem at mid-thigh, and her hair was in a rough knot at the back of her head with pieces escaping from it, and she was not wearing the careful, collected face she wore everywhere else in this house. She looked like a person who had woken up and come downstairs without putting her armor on first, and when she saw Ryan at the window, she stopped, a fraction of a second. Then she continued to the cabinet and got a mug. "You're always up early," she said. So are you, he said. I couldn't sleep. I know. She turned, mug in hand, and looked at him. You heard me last night. It wasn't accusatory, just direct. The particular directness of someone who has decided at 6 in the morning that they don't have the energy to navigate around things. Not clearly, he said, just enough to know you were awake. She held his gaze for a moment, then turned back to the coffee maker. She poured, wrapped both hands around the mug. She didn't sit. She leaned against the counter across from him, and they stood in the gray morning kitchen with their coffee and didn't talk for a while, which was fine. It had become fine, somewhere in the last 48 hours. The silence between them had changed texture, gone from the silence of two strangers managing their unfamiliarity to the silence of people who have said enough things to each other that the quiet isn't a gap anymore. Patricia told me, Ryan said. Vanessa looked at her coffee. That you paid it before you came to find me, he said. She was quiet for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a bird landed on the stone path and pecked at something and flew away. She had no right to tell you that, Vanessa said. Her voice was even, but only just. She told me because she loves you, Ryan said. She told me because she wanted me to understand something. What did she want you to understand? That the deal wasn't actually a deal, he said. That you built it to look like one because that's what I could accept. Vanessa set her mug down on the counter. She pressed the heel of her hand against the countertop and looked at the window, at the gray garden. It was practical, she said. I needed someone for the weekend. You needed the surgery covered. The structure made sense. Vanessa, she looked at him. You made the decision before you had my name, he said. Before you knew anything about me except that I was a man in a parking garage with a hospital bill. She said nothing. That's not a deal, he said. That's just a person helping someone. The kitchen was quiet for a long time. Somewhere upstairs, the old house creaked. The particular sound of a large structure adjusting to temperature change. Wood and plaster responding to the morning cold. I didn't know what to do with it, Vanessa said finally. Her voice had dropped. Not emotional, or not only that, but quieter, the way a voice gets when it's getting close to something true. I was at the gala and Patricia Okafor mentioned this case. Didn't say who, didn't say details, just there's a child, there's a surgery, there's a complication, and she looked worried in the way doctors look when they're worried about something they can't fix with medicine. She paused. And I thought about writing a check anonymously, to the hospital foundation, earmarked. She turned the mug on the counter. But anonymous money goes into a fund and gets allocated and might not reach that specific child in time. So I called my assistant and said, find out who she's talking about, because I was going to do something about it, and I needed to know where to aim it. Ryan waited. She found you in 12 minutes, Vanessa said. Ryan Bennett. The case details matched enough that we were certain. And then I read, enough. About your company, your wife, Emma. She stopped. Emma's name was in a profile piece from 2 years ago, a feature about your philanthropic work after leaving the company. There was a photo of her. She was 6 in it. She was wearing a shirt with a planet on it. Ryan said nothing. He knew the piece. A journalist had called it a human interest story. Ryan had agreed to it because the nonprofit angle was legitimate and the publicity helped their funding. He'd let them photograph Emma because she'd wanted to be in it, and he didn't have a good reason to say no. I looked at that photo, Vanessa said, and I called my CFO and said wire $347,000 to Mercy Children's Hospital billing department to cover a specific account, and I told him the patient's name, and I told him to mark it as a private charitable contribution and not to ask me about it after. She picked up her coffee. And then I told Carl to bring the car around, and I went and found you. She said it all in a straight line, the way you recite something that happened rather than something you're still uncertain about. Like she'd practiced it, or at least had it clear in her own head. Because you still needed something you could accept, Ryan said. Because I could see from across a parking structure that you were a man who would not take charity, she said, a slight edge in it. Not cruel, just precise. And I was right, you wouldn't have. If I'd walked up to your window and said I'm going to pay your daughter's bill because I saw her picture and it's the right thing to do, you would have told me no. She looked at him. Wouldn't you have, she said. He thought about it honestly. He thought about that parking structure, that midnight, that bill in his hands, The particular desperate, exhausted pride of a man who had built something enormous and lost pieces of himself along the way, and still, could not make himself take something he hadn't earned. Yes, he said. So I gave you something to exchange, she said. I made it a transaction. She set the mug down again. It was manipulative. I know that. I've thought about it. A pause. I'm not sure I'd do it differently. He looked at her. She was watching him with the careful attention of someone waiting for a reaction they can't fully predict, which he recognized as unusual for her. She struck him as someone who could usually predict the shape of a room's reaction to her. I'm not angry, he said. I didn't say you were. You're waiting to see if I am. She looked at her coffee. It was the right call, Ryan said. The method and the outcome. Both. He paused. And I think you knew it was the right call, which is why you didn't second-guess it. He looked at her. You don't second-guess things you're genuinely sure about. I've been watching you for 3 days. You only hesitate on the things that involve other people's feelings. The business decisions are made and filed, and you don't look back. She was quiet. Emma's photo, he said. She looked up. That's what made it personal, he said. Not me. Not the bill. Emma in a shirt with a planet on it. Vanessa held his gaze and didn't confirm or deny it, which was its own answer. The kitchen light had changed as they talked. The gray had warmed slightly, not to sunlight, but to the gentler silver that comes just before winter sun burns through cloud cover. It lay across the kitchen floor in a wide, soft rectangle and caught the steam rising from their mugs. The weekend is almost over, Vanessa said. Brunch, and then we leave, he said. Yes. He looked at her. The impractical sweater, the escaping hair, the mug held in both hands. The person underneath the architect of Sinclair Capital. What happens Monday? He said. She looked at him carefully. I go back to work. You go back to the hospital. A pause. The intervention in your case proceeds. Marcus should have movement by end of next week. That's not what I'm asking. She knew it wasn't. He watched her know it. I don't know, she said. And it came out honest, not evasive, not deflecting, but genuinely uncertain, which he suspected was not a thing she said about herself very often, and which cost something to say out loud. I don't know what Monday looks like. I haven't let myself think that far. Why not? She looked at the window. The garden was fully visible now in the morning light, frost on the grass, the stone path gray and still. Because thinking that far means wanting something, she said. And I haven't been particularly good at that. Lately. The word lately carrying 4 years of weight inside it, quiet and heavy. Ryan picked up his mug. He looked at the garden with her. Emma is going to ask me about you, he said. I know. I'm going to have an answer. I know that too. So will you. She turned to look at him. She'll ask me directly. She doesn't believe in the long way around. No, he said. She doesn't. A pause. Outside, wind moved through the bare trees at the edge of the garden, and the branches shifted and settled. I'd like to visit her, Vanessa said. At the hospital, before the surgery. She said it carefully, like testing the weight of a floorboard before committing to a step. Not as part of the deal. Not as anything except just going to see her. Ryan looked at her. She'd like that, he said. You don't know that. She asked you if you were my girlfriend after knowing you for 11 minutes of beryllium discussion, he said. She'd like it. Something in Vanessa's face moved. The complicated internal weather of a person receiving something they want and are not entirely sure what to do with. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. They finished their coffee in the gray morning kitchen, and when Catherine came downstairs at 7, she found them both reading. Ryan with his phone, Vanessa with a book she'd gotten from somewhere. In a comfortable parallel quiet that made Catherine stop in the doorway for just a moment before moving to the coffee maker. She said nothing. She made herself tea and began organizing brunch. But she was smiling when her back was to the room, and neither of them saw it, which was exactly how she'd intended it. Brunch was easier than any meal had been all weekend. Douglas was quieter, but quiet in the way of someone who has finished assessing and moved into simply being present. He talked about the lake in summer, swimming, sailing, the particular quality of late July evenings on the water. and Ryan found himself genuinely interested, asking questions about the area's history that Douglas answered with something approaching pleasure. The wariness between them hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted into something more like the respectful attention of two people who have decided the other is worth their full focus. Thomas had lost the competitive edge entirely. He was tired and slightly hungover from Saturday night's third glass, and without the performance, he was more likable. Funny, actually, with a dry humor that came out once the audience stopped being his father. He and Ryan had a 20-minute conversation about baseball that had nothing to do with money or status or the family name, and Ryan liked him considerably more at the end of it. "You follow the Cubs," Thomas said, with the expression of a man confronting a puzzling personal choice. "For my sins," Ryan said. Thomas pointed at him. "See? At least you know." Bree laughed. Across the table, Vanessa was watching her brother with an expression that Ryan placed after a moment, something like hope, cautious, and small. The expression of someone who wanted a thing to be true and was watching evidence accumulate in its favor and was being very careful not to need it too much. After brunch, Patricia found Ryan on the porch as the cars were being loaded. She was in her coat, hat, and gloves, ready to leave. She stood beside him and looked at the lake one last time. "You didn't knock on her door," she said. He looked at her. "Were you in the hallway?" "No, I'm inferring from context." She adjusted her gloves. "You heard her, and you didn't knock." "It wasn't the right moment," he said. "No," she agreed. "It wasn't." She paused. "You knew that." "She needed to be sad on her own terms," he said, without someone standing there requiring her to manage it. Patricia turned and looked at him with those dark, level eyes. "Marcus never understood that," she said quietly. "He was a good man, and he loved her, but he always needed to be the one who helped. He couldn't sit outside a closed door." A pause. She spent 3 years of their engagement occasionally pretending to be fine because she knew he couldn't hold the weight of her not being fine. Ryan looked at the lake. "That's a lonely way to love someone," he said. "It is," Patricia said. "Yes." She turned to go. He almost let her. Then, "Patricia," she stopped. "Why did you tell me what you told me this weekend?" he said. "Not the specific things. The why." She considered him for a moment. The wind came off the lake and moved the hem of her coat. "Because she won't," Patricia said. "She will let you see all of it eventually if you're patient enough and honest enough. But she won't narrate it for you. She doesn't have the language for that yet." She paused. "I gave you the map because she can't give it to herself. Not yet." She looked at the lake one last time. "Don't make her regret that I did." Then she went inside, and Ryan stood on the porch alone with the cold and the lake and the particular weight of being trusted with someone's map. He reached into his coat pocket and closed his hand around the rock, gray with a green tint, smooth, found on the path 2 days ago. He held it for a moment. Then he went inside to say goodbye to the family. Carl drove them back to Chicago in the early afternoon. The sky had cleared somewhat, the gray broken by sections of pale blue, the highway running straight through the flat winter landscape of southern Wisconsin, and then the north suburban sprawl, and then the city, rising at the horizon and growing gradually into itself. They sat in the back of the Escalade on the same side with the seat between them and didn't talk for the first 40 minutes. Vanessa had her laptop open and was working, genuinely working, not performing work, because there was no one to perform for in the car. Ryan had his phone and was reading updates from Marcus and a long text from Aunt Claire that had 4 photos attached. Emma with her telescope model, which had apparently been delivered to the hospital room that morning. He stared at the photos. The model was on her bedside table. She'd organized the mirror segments into a fan pattern that approximated deployment. She'd made a small label from a piece of tape that said JWST in her careful handwriting and taped it to the base. She looked proud in all 4 photos. The focused, precise pride of someone who has been given something that matches the internal world they've been carrying around. He texted Aunt Claire back. "Who brought the model?" The reply came quickly. It was here when she woke up. No card. Just a delivery from a place in the Loop. He looked out the window at the highway. He looked at the woman beside him. She was reading something on her laptop, her reading glasses on. Small frames she'd produced from her bag somewhere and that he hadn't seen before, and which made her look different, less architectural, more like a person who sometimes has to squint at small text. Vanessa, he said. Emma got the telescope model this morning. She didn't look up from her screen. I know. You had it delivered. The hospital has a receiving desk. You didn't say anything. She closed the laptop a few degrees and looked at him. I thought she'd like to have it before the surgery so she can look at it during the days before. She paused. And after, during recovery, so she has something to think about. Ryan looked at her. Also, I needed to do something with the one in the sitting room, she said, looking back at her screen. It's been in that case for 12 years. It's not doing anything useful in a display case. She opened the laptop back to full. Emma will use it. He held on to this for a moment. This woman who needed a reason, a practical, external, unemotional reason, to do every genuinely tender thing she did, so that the tenderness had somewhere to hide. Vanessa. Ryan. Stop. She looked at him. Stop finding reasons, he said. You did something kind. You don't have to explain it into practicality. She held his gaze. Something moved in her face. Not a performance, not management. The thing underneath, briefly visible. I'm working on it, she said. I know. She returned to her laptop, but after a moment she reached over without looking away from the screen and held out her hand, palm up, on the seat between them. Not dramatic, not a declaration. Just a hand, held out, in the middle of a highway, in the middle of the afternoon. Ryan looked at it for a second. Then he put his hand in hers. She kept reading. He kept watching the highway. Carl drove them south toward the city in the pale winter light, and outside the window the landscape changed from flat open country to the dense gathered suburb to the first city blocks, and neither of them said anything for a long time, and neither of them let go. He went straight from the Escalade to the hospital. Carl offered to wait. Ryan thanked him and declined, said he'd find his own way home. He went up to the 4th floor with his duffel over one shoulder and the rock in his coat pocket, and the photographs of Emma with her telescope model still visible on his phone screen. She was awake when he came in. She was sitting up, the model on the table beside her, examining the secondary mirror housing with the focused attention of a particularly small engineer. She looked up when he came in. Dad? Hey, Bug. He set his bag down and sat in the chair and looked at his daughter, still pale, still with the IV, still in the hospital that smelled like antiseptic and industrial carpet, and the slightly stale air of recycled heating systems, but alive and bright-eyed and completely absorbed in something she loved. The secondary mirror housing is not quite accurate, she told him. It's a production compromise. The real mechanism is more complex. She set it down on the table with careful hands. It's still really good. How are you feeling? Better than Friday. She looked at him. How was it? He considered what to say. He thought about the library and Douglas's assessment, Patricia on the porch twice, Vanessa in the hallway barefoot, the Saturday morning walk, the rock in his pocket. Good, he said. I think it was good. The thinking face is different, Emma said. She was studying him with the complete unself-conscious attention she used on everything she found interesting. It's the good thinking face, not the worried one. He reached into his pocket and put the rock on her bedside table next to the telescope model, gray with a green tint, smooth. Emma picked it up, turned it in her hand, held it up to the window light. It's a good one, she said. Glacially formed lake, he said. The rocks are worn smooth by old ice movement. She looked at him with the particular expression she wore when he said something she already knew and found this endearing rather than annoying. I know, Dad. She set the rock down beside the model, together on the table, the stone, and the telescope. She looked at them for a moment. Is Vanessa coming to visit? She is, he said. Before the surgery. Emma nodded. She picked up the secondary mirror housing again and turned it gently. She gave me the model, Emma said. It wasn't a question. Yes. I knew it was from her. She set the piece back carefully. There was no card, but I knew. She looked up. Does she know that I knew? Probably not, he said. Emma was quiet for a moment, looking at her table. The model, the rock, the astronaut nightlight, the stack of library books Aunt Claire had brought, The drawing she'd made of the solar system that was taped to the wall because she'd told the nurses the room needed something. "She's lonely," Emma said. Ryan looked at his daughter. "Not like sad lonely," Emma said, with the careful precision she used when she was making a distinction that mattered. "Like people lonely. She has lots of people around her all the time, probably, but not the right kind." She looked at him. "Can you tell?" "Yes," Ryan said. "I can tell." Emma considered this. "You're lonely too sometimes." "I have you," he said. "That's not an answer." She gave him the look. Patient, 8-year-old, absolutely not letting this go. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes." She nodded, like she'd expected this, like she was confirming something she'd known and needed confirmed. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to sleep now." It was 2:30 in the afternoon. "You're going to sleep," he said. "I'm tired and I've been thinking a lot today." She lay back against the pillow and pulled the blanket up and looked at the ceiling. "The model helped. I've been looking at it all day." A pause. "Tell her that. She should know it helped." "I'll tell her," he said. Emma closed her eyes. Within 2 minutes, he watched it happen. She was actually asleep. She did this. Announced sleep and then achieved it almost immediately, as though she had a switch, as though deciding to sleep was simply the end of the process. Ryan sat in the chair beside her bed. He looked at his daughter sleeping. He looked at the rock and the model on the table, the stone worn smooth by ice older than anything either of them would live to see. The telescope built to look at the beginning of the universe, folded and unfolded like origami in the dark. He pulled out his phone, typed to Vanessa. She knew the model was from you. No card. And she knew. He watched the dots appear. Then, how? He smiled at his phone. She said there was no card, but she knew. That was the whole explanation. A pause. Then, that's either very perceptive or very unnerving. Both, he typed back. Obviously. He could almost feel her smile through the phone screen 3 miles across the city, sitting in her penthouse surrounded by reports and quarterly projections and all the work she used to fill the silence with. The dots appeared again. Disappeared. Appeared. Then, "I'm going to visit Wednesday if that works." "That works," he typed. Another pause. Longer this time. He was about to put the phone down when the last message came. "Ryan, thank you for the weekend. I know it wasn't what I said it was." He read it twice, looked at Emma sleeping, looked at the rock. He typed, "None of it was what either of us said it was." He waited. The dots didn't appear this time. He put the phone in his pocket and sat with his sleeping daughter in the quiet hospital room, and outside the window the city was doing what cities do in late afternoon. The particular restless, beautiful machinery of it, the traffic and light, and 10,000 simultaneous lives happening in close proximity, most of them invisible to each other, most of them carrying something they hadn't figured out how to put down yet. He was 32 years old. His daughter was going to have surgery in a week, and she was going to be fine, and she was already looking at the pieces of it with the clarity of someone who has decided that fear and interest can coexist, and that interest is more useful. He had a rock in his coat pocket, and a phone in his hand, and the number of a woman who had paid a stranger's bill in secret, and then gotten into his truck in the rain to give him a way to accept it. He didn't know exactly what came next. He was beginning to think that was all right. The city moved outside the window. Emma breathed in the slow, steady rhythm of real sleep. The rock sat on the table next to the telescope, unremarkable and entirely specific and exactly right. Ryan Bennett sat in the chair beside his daughter's bed, and for the first time in a very long time, the silence around him felt less like a thing that had been taken and more like a thing that might be filled. He waited. He didn't mind waiting. Vanessa came on Wednesday. She didn't announce it with a text that morning, didn't send Carl ahead, didn't arrive with an assistant or a security detail or any of the apparatus that normally moved with her through the city. She just appeared at the 4th-floor nursing station at 2 p.m. in a dark coat and her reading glasses pushed up on her head, carrying a paper bag from a bakery in the Loop that Emma had mentioned in passing. During one of their phone calls, chocolate pudding in individual glass jars with gold lids, because apparently the bakery made it fresh daily, and it was, according to the nutritionist blog post Emma had been citing for 2 weeks, an acceptable recovery food. Ryan saw her from the hallway before she saw him. She was talking to Deb at the nursing station, and Deb, broad-shouldered, night shift Deb, who had seen everything and was impressed by approximately none of it, was looking at Vanessa with the particular expression of someone recalibrating their expectations of a situation. Vanessa was asking about Emma's morning vitals. Not in a pushy way, not demanding information she had no right to. Just asking, the way you ask when you care about the answer, and you understand that caring doesn't automatically entitle you to it. Deb told her the basics. Vanessa thanked her. Deb nodded once with the slow dignity of someone granting approval they hadn't been asked for but were giving anyway. Ryan walked up. Vanessa turned when she heard him, and there was that fraction of a second again, the unguarded one, the one before composure reassembled. And then she held up the paper bag. Pudding, she said. I see that. 3 jars. I was going to get 4, then I remembered your position on the 4-cup limit. 3 is fine, he said. She'll argue for a 4th. I'll refer her to you. They stood in the hallway outside Emma's room, and Ryan looked at this woman in her dark coat with her reading glasses and her bakery bag, standing in a pediatric cardiac unit on a Wednesday afternoon because an 8-year-old had mentioned a pudding place once in passing. And he thought about how the large things in life almost never arrive announcing themselves as large. They come in paper bags. They come as a number on the back of a white card. They come through a truck door in the rain. She's been awake since 7, he said. She's been reading about gravitational lensing. She'll tell you about it whether you ask or not. I know what gravitational lensing is, Vanessa said. I know you do. I'm warning you anyway because when Emma explains it, it takes a while. The corner of Vanessa's mouth moved. Noted. They went in. Emma looked up from her tablet, and her face did the thing it did when something matched what she'd been hoping for. Not a theatrical reaction, not a performance of delight, just a quiet, complete satisfaction, like a piece clicking into a slot it was made for. You came, Emma said. I said I would, Vanessa said. Some people say things, Emma said, with the philosophical equanimity of someone who has been paying attention to the gap between what people say and what people do for most of her conscious life. You actually came. Vanessa set the bag on the bedside table. Emma looked at it. Is that from Morel's? Emma said. The chocolate pudding. Emma looked at her father. She got it from Morel's. I see that, Ryan said. That's the good one. Emma picked up one of the jars and examined it with the focused attention she gave to most things worth examining. The one at the hospital is from a catering company. It tastes like they apologized for making it. Vanessa sat in the chair Ryan usually occupied, not the one against the wall, the one right beside the bed. And Ryan leaned against the windowsill, and Emma set down the jar and picked up her tablet and said, Do you know about gravitational lensing? Light bending around massive objects, Vanessa said, creates a magnification effect. Astronomers use it to see things the telescope couldn't otherwise resolve. Emma looked at her tablet, then at Vanessa. Most people don't know that. I looked it up this morning, Vanessa said. You mentioned it on Monday. Emma considered this. Considered it the way she considered data, not emotionally, but carefully, turning it over, looking at what it implied. You looked it up because I mentioned it, Emma said. Yes. Before you came. Yes. Emma nodded slowly. Something had been confirmed. Ryan watched his daughter file it, whatever it was, whatever it meant to her, and then returned to her tablet. The Webb telescope used it last year, Emma said, to image a galaxy cluster from 13 billion years ago, almost to the beginning of everything. She held the tablet up and showed Vanessa the image, a deep field photograph, thousands of galaxies visible, the foreground ones bending the light of the ones behind them into arcs and rings of pale color. See these arcs? Those aren't real shapes. Those are closer galaxies distorting the image of galaxies behind them, like a cosmic lens. Vanessa looked at the image. So what we're seeing isn't actually what's there. It's more than what's there, Emma said. The distortion lets us see things we couldn't see without it. The imperfection makes it possible. She put the tablet down. I think that's interesting, that the distortion is the point. Ryan looked at his daughter. He thought sometimes that Emma processed the world in a language that was technically about physics and was actually about something else entirely. That she had found, young and without trying, a way of thinking about everything through the lens of how the universe worked. and that the universe was generous enough in its metaphors to accommodate most of what she needed to understand. The distortion is the point. He looked at Vanessa. She was looking at Emma with an expression he'd seen once before, in the video call, during the beryllium conversation, the moment when the unmanaged smile had gotten out before she could catch it. But this was longer. This was the expression of someone who has encountered something unexpected and is not rushing to categorize it. "I never thought about it that way," Vanessa said. "Most people don't," Emma said, not unkindly. "But it's true. Some of the most important things we know about the universe, we only know because something got in the way." She opened one of the pudding jars. "Do you want some?" "It's yours," Vanessa said. "I know. Do you want some?" A pause. "Yes," Vanessa said. "Okay." Emma handed her a spoon from the tray, the one Ryan had never seen anyone else use, the one Emma kept specifically because the hospital spoons were too flat. She handed it across with the gravity of someone making a considered decision. They ate pudding. Emma from the jar, Vanessa from the jar. Emma handed her. In a hospital room on a Wednesday afternoon, while outside the window, Chicago was doing its December thing, cold and gray and fully itself, indifferent to the fact that 3 people were sitting inside one of its buildings in the particular arrangement of something becoming true. Ryan watched them. He thought about what it costs to want something after loss has taught you the specific price of wanting. He thought about how Vanessa had built her life around the avoidance of that cost. Not cowardly. He didn't think it was cowardice. He thought it was the completely reasonable response of an intelligent person who had done the math and found the math unbearable. And he thought about how the first crack in that architecture had not been him, had not been the parking garage or the weekend or any of the things between 2 adults who were both, in their own ways, scarred and careful and slow. The first crack had been a photo of a 6-year-old in a shirt with a planet on it, and he thought that this was probably true of most things that actually changed people, that they didn't come in through the front door of our rational defenses, the ones we've spent years reinforcing. They came in through the side, through the unexpected angle, through the thing we weren't guarding because we didn't know it needed guarding. Emma looked up from her pudding. "Dad?" "Yeah, you have the good thinking face again." "I'm listening," he said. "You were somewhere else." "I'm back," he said. Emma examined him for a moment. Then she looked at Vanessa, then back at him. Then she returned to her pudding with the satisfied expression of someone who has confirmed a hypothesis and sees no need to announce it. Emma's surgery was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The 5 days between Vanessa's Wednesday visit and the surgery had a specific quality to them. The quality of time before an event that matters, where each day is both too slow and too fast, where normal things happen normally but with a slightly heightened texture, the way colors look different just before rain. Vanessa came back on Friday and Saturday. Not for long either time. An hour, maybe less. But she came, and she brought things that were always specific. A book about the history of space exploration on Friday, because Emma had mentioned she'd run out of library books. A second rock on Saturday, this one from the shoreline near her penthouse building on the lakefront, pale and flat and smooth, which Emma accepted with the solemnity of someone receiving a specimen for a collection. Ryan watched her navigate the hospital the way he'd watched her navigate the estate, carefully, attentively, learning the rhythms and adjusting to them. She learned Deb's name by the second visit and used it correctly. She learned that Emma's best hours were morning and early afternoon, and that by 4 she got tired and needed the room quieter. She learned these things not because Ryan told her, but because she paid attention, which was, he thought, her most fundamental quality. She paid attention with her whole self when she decided something was worth it. She and Ryan didn't have large conversations during these visits. They talked the way people talk when they're sharing a space and a concern, and have already said enough important things that the smaller things can come forward. He told her about Marcus's update. The asset freeze partial lift had been approved. He'd have access to a significant portion within a week, enough to stabilize. She told him about a deal at Sinclair Capital that was giving her trouble, a founder who reminded her of someone she didn't name but that Ryan understood from context. On Saturday evening, after Emma had fallen asleep mid-conversation about the Viking Mars landers, they stood in the corridor outside her room and Vanessa leaned against the wall and looked at the floor for a moment. "I'm scared about Tuesday," she said. Ryan looked at her. So am I. I know you are. I didn't want to say it to you because it seemed... She paused. I didn't want to add to what you're carrying. You're not adding to it, he said. You're just in it. That's different. She looked up at him. The corridor was fluorescent and slightly too bright the way hospital corridors always are, and it was not a flattering light for anyone, and she looked tired and real and entirely like herself in it. I don't know how to do this, she said. Being in it. I've been adjacent to things for a long time, managing from the perimeter. She pressed the back of her head against the wall. Emma is not perimeter material. No, he agreed. She isn't. Neither are you, she said. It came out quieter than the rest, like she'd been carrying it at a different volume and set it down. Ryan looked at this woman in the fluorescent corridor. He thought about a parking garage, about the way she'd gotten into the truck without knocking, without asking, with the committed energy of someone who had made a decision before they had all the information and was seeing it through. He thought about Patricia saying she made the decision before she had information. That's not how Vanessa operates. You already know how to do it, he said. You've been doing it. You showed up on Wednesday with pudding because she mentioned a bakery once. That's not adjacent. That's in. She looked at him. You're in it, he said. You've been in it since you got in my truck. She held his gaze for a long moment, and then something happened that he hadn't seen happen before. Not the managed, almost smile, not the unguarded and quickly recovered expression, but something more complete. Her face did what faces do when a person stops working against something and just lets it be true. She reached out and straightened the collar of his jacket. It was a small gesture, slightly crooked in its execution. Her hand brushed his jaw in the process, which he didn't think she'd intended. And it meant nothing and everything simultaneously, the way the smallest physical gestures often contain the things people can't quite organize into sentences. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She pushed off the wall. I'm going home. I'll be here Tuesday morning. You don't have to be. I know I don't have to be. She put on her coat. I'll be here. She left. He watched her go down the corridor toward the elevator, and he thought, not for the first time and not with any resolution, about the specific bravery of people who have been genuinely hurt going back for more anyway. Not recklessly, not without fear, but going back, which is the only kind of bravery that actually counts. Tuesday arrived the way important days arrive, without ceremony, without the dramatic weather the occasion seemed to deserve, just another morning doing its morning things. Ryan had been at the hospital since 6. Emma had been awake when he arrived. She'd been awake for a while, he could tell, though she said she'd slept fine. She had the rock on her pillow beside her, the gray-green one from Lake Geneva. I'm going to hold it, she told him, before they take me in. Then you can have it back. Keep it, he said. I will after, she said. Before, I want you to have it so you have something to hold while you wait. She gave him the look, the calm, practical, completely serious look of someone who has thought about logistics. You do better with something to do with your hands. He took the rock. Vanessa arrived at 7:15. She came in and sat in the chair and said good morning to Emma, and did not make a large moment out of the fact that she was there, which was exactly right. Emma didn't need a large moment. She needed things to be ordinary, and Vanessa understood this without being told. They waited together, the three of them, through the pre-op preparation, through the conversations with Dr. Okafor, through the paperwork and the vitals and the particular bureaucratic choreography of a hospital morning. Ryan held the rock. Vanessa sat beside him with her knee against his and her hands in her lap and was entirely present, which was what presence actually meant. Not filling the silence, not managing the mood, just being there, occupying the space with the full weight of herself. When the transport team came for Emma at 8:40, Emma sat up and looked at both of them. She looked at Ryan first. I'll see you on the other side, she said, in the particular voice she used for things she'd decided were not going to be bigger than they needed to be. I'll be here, he said. His voice was steady. He was very focused on keeping it steady. Then she looked at Vanessa. The distortion is the point, Emma said. Vanessa looked at her. I was thinking about it, Emma said. The lensing thing. The imperfection making it possible. She lay back against the gurney pillow. I think it's true about more than telescopes. Vanessa's hand, which had been on the arm of the chair, moved to the gurney rail and rested there for a moment, just near Emma's hand. Not touching, just close. Yeah, Vanessa said, I think so too. Emma closed her eyes as the transport team started moving. She was doing her no anesthesia is just a gap between moments thing. Ryan could see it in her face, the active application of a framework she'd decided to trust. She was going to be fine. He knew it the way you know the things you have to believe in order to keep standing. The gurney went through the double doors. Ryan and Vanessa stood in the room after it was gone. The model was still on the bedside table. The spare rock was still there, Emma's drawings on the wall. Ryan pressed the heel of his free hand against his mouth for a second. Vanessa put her arm through his. Not a hug, just her arm through his arm, standing beside him, her shoulder against his shoulder. And she didn't say anything because there was nothing useful to say, and she'd apparently fully learned by now that the useless things didn't need filling. They stood there for a moment. Then he said, "Coffee." "Yes," she said. They went to find it. Bummed. The surgery took 4 hours and 11 minutes, which Ryan knew because he looked at his phone. At the moment, Dr. Okafor appeared in the waiting room doorway, and he had been looking at it every few minutes for 4 hours and 11 minutes. Vanessa had spent the first hour working on her laptop, and the second hour not working on her laptop, and the third and fourth hours sitting with her hands in her lap, looking at the middle distance, which he understood as her version of the same thing he was doing, which was existing in the suspension of time that waiting creates. Dr. Okafor was smiling, not a large smile. She was a controlled, precise person, but a genuine one. "It went very well," she said. "She's in recovery. She'll be awake in an hour or so." Ryan put the rock in his pocket. He said thank you in a voice that wasn't entirely level and didn't try to make it otherwise. Dr. Okafor shook his hand and Vanessa's hand and went back through the doors. And Ryan sat down in the chair he'd been in for 4 hours because his legs had decided this was a good moment to register their opinion, and Vanessa sat beside him and said nothing at all for a while, which was correct. When Emma came around in recovery, she said, before she said anything else, before she'd fully surfaced, "Did it work?" "It worked," Ryan said. She closed her eyes again. "Good," she said. "I have a lot of plans." He laughed, couldn't help it. It came out of him like a reflex, startled out by pure relief, and he pressed his hand over his face and breathed. Vanessa, in the chair beside him, put her head briefly against his shoulder. Just for a second. Then she sat straight again and looked at Emma, and her face was doing the complicated thing again. The thing he'd stopped trying to decode and had started just accepting as what Vanessa looked like when she felt something she didn't have language for yet. Emma, half conscious, said, "Vanessa." "Yeah." "The pudding." "I'll get it tomorrow," Vanessa said. "From Morel's." "From Morel's." Emma made a satisfied sound and went back under. Ryan looked at the ceiling and breathed. "But what?" The weeks after the surgery had their own texture, different from before, different from the suspended waiting. Recovery had a shape to it, a little better every day, setbacks that were temporary, milestones that were real. Emma's energy came back in installments. First, she was awake more. Then, she wanted her tablet. Then she started asking questions again with the full force of her attention, which Dr. Okafor said was the best possible sign, though she said it with the expression of someone who had been on the receiving end of Emma's questions for 20 minutes and needed a moment. Vanessa came regularly. Not every day. She had a company, and she ran it, and Ryan understood what that meant, but often enough that her presence stopped being an event and became a pattern. A thing that happened, a thing that could be counted on. One afternoon in January, Ryan arrived at the hospital to find the two of them already in conversation. Vanessa in the chair, Emma sitting up with the telescope model in her lap, explaining the timeline of the universe in the particular way she explained things, which was thoroughly and with occasional diversions into tangential topics that were connected by a logic she held internally and revealed only when she arrived at the point. Ryan stood in the doorway for a moment, watching. Vanessa was not looking at her phone. She was not half listening while she organized her next thought. She was sitting in the hospital chair with her coat still on because she'd just arrived, and she was looking at Emma, and she was listening with her whole face. He thought about what he'd told her in the corridor. "You're in it. You've been in it since you got in my truck." She was in it. He went in and sat down, and Emma seamlessly folded him into the conversation without losing her thread. and they sat there in the January hospital room for 2 hours talking about the age of the universe and a 9-year-old mission to Pluto and Emma's updated career plan, which now involved both astrophysics and, for reasons that were their own, structural engineering of space habitats. You'd need both, Vanessa said. Someone has to design where people live when they get there. Exactly, Emma said, pointing at her. That's what I said. She did say that, Ryan confirmed. Vanessa looked at him over Emma's head, and for a moment it was just that. Two people looking at each other over a child who contained multitudes, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and had crayon drawings on the wall, in the ordinary, extraordinary middle of a life that had arrived at this configuration through routes neither of them had planned. He thought, I don't know how any of this happened. He thought, it doesn't matter. Emma was discharged on a Thursday in late January. The day was cold but clear, the particular clear of late winter, the sky a hard deep blue over the city, the air sharp and clean and honest about its temperature. Ryan packed her things while Emma said goodbye to Deb with the formality of someone wrapping up a significant professional collaboration, which Deb accepted with the same gravity Emma offered it. In the car going home, Emma held the rock in her lap and looked out the window at the city going past. It looks different, she said. The city? Everything. She turned the rock in her hand. When you're inside somewhere for a long time, when you come out, everything looks slightly different, like the contrast is turned up. She looked at him. Have you noticed that? Yes, he said. I think it's because inside everything is kind of the same. Same light, same air, same sounds. Then outside there's variation. Your eyes have to readjust to variation. She looked back out the window. It's not that things are actually different. Your eyes are just recalibrated. He drove. I think people work the same way, Emma said. If you're inside something for long enough, like inside sadness or inside being alone, when you come out, everything has more contrast. It's more there. She paused. I think that's what happened to Vanessa. She was inside something for a long time. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. I think that's right. She's coming out now, Emma said. You can tell because she notices things more. She was already good at noticing things, but now she notices Emma searched for the word. The variation. Ryan thought about a woman who had sat in a hospital chair for 4 hours not looking at her phone, who had looked up gravitational lensing before coming to visit, who had straightened his collar in a fluorescent corridor and said, okay, in the voice of someone who had finally stopped fighting something. Yeah, he said, again. Emma seemed satisfied. She looked back out the window. After a while, she said, when is she coming over? Saturday, Ryan said, to our apartment. Yes? She's never been to our apartment. I know. Emma absorbed this. It's small. It is. It has my stuff everywhere. It does. And the kitchen table has a wobbly leg. It's been like that for a year, Ryan said. I keep meaning to fix it. Emma looked at him with the expression she reserved for his organizational failures, which was affectionate but honest. You're not going to fix it. Probably not. That's fine, she said. It gives the table character. She turned back to the window. Vanessa will be fine with the apartment. She doesn't care about that stuff. How do you know? Because she sat in that hospital chair for months, Emma said simply. If she cared about the stuff, she'd have found somewhere more comfortable. He couldn't argue with that logic. Vanessa came on Saturday. She came the way she'd come to the hospital those last weeks. Without Carl, without the coat and composure armor, in jeans and a dark sweater, with a small plant in a terracotta pot, because Emma had said once that she wanted something living in the apartment, something that grew, and Vanessa had apparently stored this information and acted on it without announcement. Ryan's apartment was, as Emma had summarized, small. The living room and kitchen were one space with a large window that faced north and got good light in the morning. Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator and a significant portion of the wall beside the bookshelf. The wobbly-legged kitchen table held Ryan's laptop, 3 astronomy magazines, and a coffee mug that had been there since Thursday, and that he moved when he saw Vanessa's eyes find it. Vanessa put the plant on the windowsill. Emma appeared from her room in her pajamas and assessed the plant with her head tilted. What kind is it? Emma said. Pothos, Vanessa said. Nearly impossible to kill. It grows toward light and doesn't require a strict schedule. Emma nodded slowly. That's a good choice for us. I thought so. Emma looked at the pot for another moment, then looked at Ryan. It needs a name. It's a plant, Ryan said. Everything needs a name, Emma said, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious. She looked at Vanessa. What do you think? Vanessa considered the plant. Something that suits the job, she said. A plant that grows toward light. She paused. Voyager. Emma looked at the plant, then at Vanessa, then at Ryan. Voyager, Emma said. After the probe, Vanessa said. Still moving, still sending back data, 47 years into its mission. Emma's face did the complete untheatrical settling thing, the piece into slot click. Voyager, she confirmed, and it was decided. They made dinner together. Not elegantly. Emma was in charge of the salad, which meant it was mostly torn pieces of romaine with an aggressive amount of cheese and very little dressing, because Emma's position on dressing was that it hid the actual food. Ryan made pasta, which was within his genuine competence. Vanessa was tasked with bread and produced a very good garlic bread from a baguette she'd brought, which Emma declared better than the hospital bread by a margin she quantified specifically. They ate at the wobbly-legged table. Vanessa's elbow found the wobble on the first try, and Ryan caught her cup before it tipped. And she said thank you without looking up from her food, and he said it had been like that for a year. And she said he should fix it, and he said probably not. And Emma said she'd already told him, and they all knew it was fine. After dinner, Emma fell asleep on the couch under a blanket within 20 minutes. Surgery recovery still had its requirements, and her body collected the debt at unpredictable hours. Ryan put a second blanket over her and turned off the overhead light, leaving the lamp on by the window. He and Vanessa did the dishes, stood side by side at the small kitchen sink, him washing, her drying with the dish towel she'd found on the second try, the sounds of the city outside and Emma breathing on the couch, and the specific domestic ordinary unremarkable realness of two people cleaning up after dinner. She named the plant in 30 seconds, Vanessa said. She's fast when something is obvious to her, Ryan said. Is it obvious? He looked at her. The name, she said, or the plant. She looked at the pothos on the windowsill, catching the lamplight. Or all of it. Is it obvious to her? I think it's been obvious to her since the video call, he said. The beryllium conversation. She knew something by the end of that. Vanessa dried a plate, set it on the rack. I didn't, she said. I know. I mean, she stopped, held the dish towel. I think I knew something, but I was still deciding whether to know it. She paused. That sounds like a strange thing to say. No, he said. It sounds like exactly the right thing to say. She looked at him. In the lamplight and the kitchen quiet, with her reading glasses pushed up on her head and flour from the bread on the sleeve of her sweater, she looked like a person who had finally arrived somewhere after a very long time of being in transit. I'm still scared sometimes, she said. I want you to know that. Not of you, of the shape of this, how much space it takes up. She looked at Emma on the couch. How much I'd lose if something went wrong. Ryan turned off the water. He turned to face her. I know, he said. I'm scared of that too. You don't seem scared. I've had more practice carrying it, he said. The fear doesn't go away. You just get better at not letting it drive. She held the dish towel with both hands. She looked at him with that thing he'd been watching accumulate over weeks. The recalibration Patricia had named. The contrast turned back up on a person who has been inside something for too long and is finding their way out of it into the variation of the world. I bought the model for her before I went to find you, she said. That night in December, before I got in your truck. He looked at her. I bought it for a child I hadn't met, she said. That's when I knew something was different. I don't do things I can't explain to myself, and I couldn't explain that. She set the dish towel on the counter. I still can't, entirely. He thought about Emma. The distortion is the point. The imperfection makes it possible. He thought about the fact that none of this had been the right way to start something. The rain and the deal and the fake relationship and the estate weekend and all the scaffolding they'd built around something that didn't need scaffolding, had never needed it, had been real from the moment she slid into a stranger's truck and asked about the open window. You don't have to explain it, he said. Not to me. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said. And something in the way she said it, steady and quiet and entirely without the controlled remove she'd had that first night in the truck, told him that she meant it in the larger sense. Not just this moment, the whole of it. She knew she didn't have to explain herself to him. She'd figured that out somewhere along the way, through the hospital corridors and the estate porch and the fluorescent hallway and the wobbly-legged dinner table. And she was keeping it now, this knowledge, like something found and pocketed, small and dense and permanent. He reached up and moved the reading glasses from the top of her head to the counter beside her, where they wouldn't be in the way, and she looked at him with a slight exasperated expression that was entirely warm. I can do that myself, she said. I know, he said. I did it anyway. She looked at him. He looked at her. Behind them, Emma made the small sound she made when she was deeply, completely asleep. A quiet exhale, unguarded, the sound of someone fully at rest in a place they trust. Voyager. The plant sat on the windowsill in the lamplight. The wobbly table held its ground. Outside, Chicago did what it did. Enormous and indifferent and full of lives, people in cars and lit windows and late buses, 10,000 overlapping stories happening simultaneously in the cold January air, most of them invisible to each other, most of them carrying the ordinary miraculous weight of being a person trying to find their way towards something worth finding. Ryan thought about a parking garage at midnight, a bill with a number on it that had seemed impossible. A woman who had made a decision before she had all the information and had gotten in a truck anyway. He thought about Emma asking if the surgery would feel like dark. Vanessa saying, not even dark. Just one moment, and then another moment, with nothing in between. He thought that this was probably true of most things worth having. You are somewhere. And then, without entirely knowing how you cross the distance, you are somewhere else. And it isn't one decision or one night or one conversation that moves you. It's the accumulation of small, imperfect, specific things. A pudding jar. A rock worn smooth by ice. A plant named after something still moving, still transmitting, 47 years and counting into the dark. Stay, he said. Not urgently, just honestly. The way you say the thing you mean when you finally stopped constructing the careful way to say it. Vanessa looked at him. Then she looked at Emma on the couch, then at Voyager on the windowsill, then back at him. Okay, she said. The same word as before, but different this time, fuller, more settled. The word of someone who has weighed the thing and decided, not lightly, not without knowing the cost, but genuinely. The lamp cast its circle of light. The city moved outside. Emma slept, and in a small apartment with drawings on the walls and a wobbly-legged table and a plant just beginning to reach toward the window, 3 people found themselves, for the first time in a long time, in exactly the right place. Not because it was perfect, because it was real. And real, it turns out, was the only thing that had ever actually been enough.